Festerson, Harding, Jerem, Melton, Pauls, Palermo, Mr. President.
Here. Would everyone, can I have everybody's attention, please? If everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our invocation today by Councilmember Chris Jerem. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I'm sure everyone's here today because they made a New Year's resolution to start attending council meetings. But it is good to see so many of you here, and welcome. Just something to think about is that if you've read the paper lately, it just seems like there's double pages of obituaries. And that brings to mind that there's a lot of people this time of year who have lost people that are close to them. And if you know somebody that's in that situation, try to think about reaching out to them and being supportive in some way to help them get through the time that they're in. So, amen.
Amen.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. The council thanks you for being here this afternoon. As a courtesy to those in attendance, we would ask you to turn off or mute any of your electronic devices. Before we begin the major portion of our agenda today, we have a proclamation that I'm going to read, and it's on behalf of a gentleman who has served the city of Omaha in a number of capacities for a good number of years. I won't say how many because I don't know, and we're going to keep that a secret, Arnold. But Arnold Nesbitt was currently is just left the planning board, and we'd like for Arnold to come up. He was with the planning board, and his term had expired. He was also on the Human Rights and Relations Board for a while as well. So we wanted to take this opportunity to do a special proclamation for you. Because we wanted to thank you for the service that you've given to the city of Omaha. And so with that, I'm going to read this proclamation and give it to you, and then if you have any comments you'd like to make, we certainly would be glad to hear from you. Our proclamation begins, whereas Arnold Nesbitt was first appointed to the Omaha Planning Board on January 26, 1988 by Mayor Bernie Simon, I remember that name, and was reappointed to another 5-year term in January of 1992 by Mayor P.J. Morgan, and whereas Mr. Nesbitt was again appointed to the Planning Board by Mayor Mike Fahey in March of 2007, and was subsequently reappointed in 2008 and 2013, and whereas Arnold Nesbitt originally came to Omaha to work for Union Pacific Railroad and was inspired by the then CEO, Robert Kenefick, to serve the community, and whereas Mr. Nesbitt has embraced this service attitude wholeheartedly, serving on countless civic and professional boards in Omaha, and whereas Mr. Nesbitt's years of service on the board have provided him with a unique historical point of view that benefits all board members, and whereas during his years of service on the planning board, Mr. Nesbitt has been witness to tremendous city growth, and whereas Mr. Nesbitt is known for his consistency and honesty during even the most contentious issues before the board, and whereas Arnold Nesbitt's final term is set to expire on February 3rd, 2018, giving him more time to spend with his wife Wanda and their children, and whereas the city of Omaha recognizes Arnold Nesbitt's service for the citizens of Omaha, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Omaha declares January 9th, 2018, Arnold Nesbitt Day, and witness whereof we have set forth our hand and caused the official seal of the City of Omaha to be affixed this 9th day of January, 2018. Congratulations, Mr. Nesbitt.
It's different being on this side. Might be even more safer.
Yes.
We get first crack at him, or did we get last crack at him?
I tell you what. Why don't we get first crack at him, and then we'll go from there. I'll let my colleagues on the council. I know they have a few comments for you as well. So let me start with. And since Mr. Harding was the first one to start, we'll call on Mr. Harding first.
Arnold, I had the pleasure of, well, I've known you for many years, but also served with you on the planning board. And I want to thank you for your leadership on that board and all that you've done for the city. And you were a great mentor to me when I was on the board, the planning board. And the lessons that I've learned from you, I will always remember. And thank you for your service.
Thank you. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. Also short and sweet. A fellow board member of yours as well on the planning board also. I think you outranked me and Mr. Harding by about 15 years on that board, but I also want to thank you for your service, and it always was a pleasure working with you, and always appreciated your perspective as well. And I know we can do one thing for you here today. You have a parking pass in your pocket there, and after 20 years of service, I told him he can get it validated at the city council office when he's done. Thanks, Arnold. Wish you the best.
Arnold, the floor is yours.
I don't even like.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, you do. We want everybody to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council members. Thank you to the City of Omaha. Thanks to the Mayor of Omaha. And thanks to the citizens of Omaha. I've had a great time being on the planning board. I felt that I learned a lot. I hope that I contributed a lot. And made a few friends. Lost a few friends. Always happens. But it's important that citizens participate in the running of the city. And when I came to Omaha, and I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, I moved here via New York to come to work at Union Pacific. And when I got here, the chairman of the railroad, John
Kennefick.
Suggested that employees of the railroad should do a bit more than just pick up their checks from the building. We should be participants. So I decided to participate, and I was selected to be on the city planning board. As I said, I had a great time. I learned a lot. I saw the city grow. I've seen the city grow in many, many ways, many, many aspects. And I think we're going to continue to see that grow. I said on my last meeting that there's no finer planning department, planning people in the country than the people in the city of Omaha's planning department. And I think you guys have a treasure that you should protect. My wife told me when I left the house last Wednesday to come down here for the planning board meeting, she said, you know, this is the third or fourth time you've left for your last planning board meeting. I think she's right this time. I've enjoyed coming down here. I spent a lot of time down here. I think leaving this time allows me a couple of freedoms. I don't have to plan my vacations around the first Wednesday of every month. I was in New York last month and had to scurry to get back here for this month's planning board meeting. I don't have to do that, but I'm going to warn you folks. Now that I have some time on my hand, you may see me as a part of this audience, which may not be fun, because I intend to continue to be active, you know, on those issues that I think need some support, need some discussion. I'll find a seat out here somewhere. So with that said, I want to say again, thank you, City of Omaha. Thank you, citizens of Omaha. Thank you, City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Nesbitt, for your years of service. Madam Clerk.
Items 6 to 10 can be considered together for the Elkhorn River Preserve Project located at 222nd Street and West Maple Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 6, an ordinance to rezone this property from CC to CC. Item 7, an ordinance to rezone this property from CC to AG. Item 8, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the MCC overlay district to incorporate into that district the property located on Lot 1 of the Elkhorn River Preserve. Item 9, a resolution to approve the Elkhorn River Preserve final plat. Item 10, a resolution to approve the Elkhorn River Preserve subdivision agreement.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 6 through 10 are today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Lose, 10836 Old Mill Road, here on behalf of GP Industries. I noticed Randy Bailey is in the audience as well, here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve items 6 through 10. There are no lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 6 through 10 are approved 7-0. Items 11 to 13 can be considered together for the Sagewood Valley project located at 180th and Fort Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 11, an ordinance to rezone this property from AG to R4. Item 12, a resolution to approve the Sagewood Valley final plat. Item 13, a resolution to approve the Sagewood Valley subdivision agreement.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 11, 12, and 13 are today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. Mark Johnson, 11440 West Center Road, appearing today on behalf of the applicant Celebrity Homes. I'm just here today to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve items 11, 12, and 13. No lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 11 through 13 are approved 7-0. Item 14, a resolution to approve a special use permit application submitted by Lakeside Auto Recyclers, Inc. for a major amendment to a special use permit to allow scrap and salvage services in an HI district located at 1404 Grace Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on agenda item number 14 is today. Proponents, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Brent Beller, 1144 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the project applicant Lakeside Auto Recyclers. Before you today is an amendment to an existing special use permit. Wait for this to kind of focus a bit. Essentially, the project applicant is expanding and altering their scrap and salvage uses on this property, building a new transfer station. I'm not sure why it's not focusing. I might have a better. Actually, let's just go straight to the site plan. In conjunction with their, it's basically an overhaul of the site. So in conjunction with the overhaul, you'll see right here they're building, and it's kind of hard to see right now, a new transfer station, which will allow greater intake of scrap and salvage, which is causing the increase in the special use permit. In addition, they're going to be placing new concrete pads along the eastern portion of the property. So just to give a little bit of clarity on what we're doing. So this is north. West is residential uses. To the east is more heavy industrial uses. To the south, heavy industrial. As part of this whole process, we went before both the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals. We actually got a waiver of the residential to scrap and salvage use requirements. There was an existing permit for that, which we expanded from Grant Street. We're being allowed to expand that north to Sherwood Ave. So that has already been approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals. There's an existing building right here that we're demoing, but again, the idea was let's try to keep most of the scrap and salvage on the eastern portion of the property, keep it as far away from the residential uses as we can on the east, and allow for this, a better intake and flow of traffic. As they increase in production with more scrap and salvage, they thought an overall site refit was needed as well. So with that, we appreciate the council's consideration here for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. Beller, just a couple of questions for you.
You bet.
So I assume there's appropriate screening to the west there, to the residential side, right?
That's right, Brent Beller, 1144 West Center Road. One of our conditions with the planning board was to make sure that we had sufficient screening. So not only is there's a fence that runs along that western property line, there's also actually storage containers, which are old shipping containers that they put in there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of folks there's a railroad line that runs along the western portion of the property, and there's a lot of folks that frequent that area. So as much as, they want to get in, we want to also keep them out. So those storage containers, to my knowledge, are doing a pretty good job of creating that buffer.
Okay. And then I just want to make sure that you and your clients are aware of the property crime ordinance and are in compliance with electronic reporting to the Leads Online. You're nodding your head.
To my knowledge, they are, and I think I could ask Tim to come on up and talk about that more, just because they probably deal with it on a day-to-day basis more than I do. But I know there's some crime down there, and from my knowledge, they report it.
Okay. So I would like to have confirmation of that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Is he here? Okay.
Sure.
So what I'm referring to is the property crime ordinance the council adopted about a year ago that requires basic point-of-sale systems at salvage yards and also pawn shops that require intake of certain precious metals and things like that to deter property crime.
1404 Grace, Omaha, Nebraska. Yes, we are like the only company in Omaha that is doing Leads Online 100%. Nobody else is doing as much as we are.
Great.
We got with Bill Phil every day, talk to him on all the Leads Online type stuff. We take the camera, we take the photos, we take the fingerprints. We got uploaded every time. We do everything.
And it has been manageable from your perspective?
Yes.
Great. I think it is too, and it's produced great results in terms of the police department and return property, so we appreciate you doing that.
Right.
Thanks.
Yep.
Motion approved.
Second, no lights, roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 14 is approved, 7-0. Item 15, an ordinance to approve a major amendment to the mixed-use district development agreement for West Dodge Hills located southwest of 180th Street and West Dodge Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on agenda item number 15 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 15. No lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 15 is approved, 7-0. Item 16, an ordinance to create street improvement district number 6883 in the city of Omaha for the purpose of improving Woolworth Avenue from South 80th Street to Ridgewood Avenue.
Public hearing on agenda item number 16 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon. Barry Javazzi, 1330 South 80th Street. My wife and I moved to this neighborhood in the northwest corner of 80th and Woolworth. At the beginning, we didn't notice Woolworth Street because our house driveway is located on the 80th Street. But Woolworth is basically 100% gravel road sitting on the steep hill with multiple potholes on the top and the huge, large, deep ditches in both corners that's hazardous for walking and driving. And while I was new to the neighborhood, I decided to take a leadership role for this SID to go forward. And after talking to our neighbors and the property owners, they feel strongly that the public tax money should pay for public streets. But although I agree with that, but it seems that nobody wants to pay for it at this time. While it was not easy, I gathered about 51% of the linear frontage of the street to sign to support of this SID formation. And there are about 7 residents in this block that 2 of them already have to pay for the Ridgewood Avenue improvement because they're looking at the corner of the lots and at the bottom of the hill. I just want to ask this council that hopefully we can go forward to the next phase of this process, and with the help of mayor's administration and city council, that can come up with a more fair cost-sharing plan that everybody can support. I thank you for your understanding and your time and the service on this council.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Yes, I'm Thomas Tape at 8023 Woolworth, and I just wanted to provide a little additional history since Barry is new to our neighborhood. I've lived at this location for the past 20 years, and up until the time that the city ground the road into gravel, we had no trouble with drainage. But since the asphalt street that had troughs on either side to guide the water down the hill were removed, we have ditches that are really quite a pedestrian hazard. They're approximately 18 inches deep and a foot wide. At one point, about a year ago, the city filled in those ditches with gravel. The first rainstorm washed it all out, most of which washed into the front yards and the driveways of the people live on either side of the street. So I think we really have a public safety hazard here for both cars with tires getting stuck in the ditch as well as for pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Hi, Ryan Palmer, 1326 Ridgewood Avenue. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the rest of the council for hearing our comments today. First, I want to I think it's appropriate to take a quick minute and say to each of you that I really appreciate the sacrifices that you make in your personal and your financial lives in order to be present as council members and represent your constituents and the rest of the city as you do. So thank you. Thank you for your service. Now, I live on the street that's actually down, like at the bottom of the hill that Woolworth is on, Ridgewood Avenue. You know, the one where our 2-block SID is going to need a storm sewerage big enough to handle water from the surrounding 80 acres and more than 100 other lots outside of our 2 blocks that are in the SID. And so, I mean, we really want this Woolworth SID to happen and move forward quickly, because if it doesn't happen when ours is being done, then we're going to have the reclaimed street surface washing down into Ridgewood and onto the yards and the parkways and the sidewalks, and we're trying to get that street improved to concrete. And so, I mean, in this neighborhood, we're talking about 50 to 70 or 80-year-old homes that are on streets that have been inside the city limits for decades, okay? And ever since they were reclaimed, ground up to gravel, and the maintenance plan that has been, it's almost like they're a country road, you know, a gravel road out in the country that nobody needs to drive on. And that's just not right. And I hope that you can all understand that part of the reason that these streets haven't been updated is that most people expect their public tax dollars to pay for public streets, especially in the case of these few blocks. And I hope that you can also please realize and understand, all of the council can realize and understand that a big reason why this street and Ridgewood in particular have deteriorated so badly is mostly because of the erosion from the massive amounts of storm water that they take on, combined with the fact that they're a through street that provides routes to public schools. I mean, the elementary school's 2 blocks away, the high school's a few blocks away, and the middle school's a few blocks away. We get a lot of school traffic on these few blocks in particular. And I've become very aware in this process, and I hope you all understand, that most people don't want to pay a bunch of money for a street that other people use more than they do. Streets like this are dangerous, and they make Omaha look bad. And since the city doesn't have an official policy in place, it's really up to this council to treat the property owners fairly when enough of them can get together to address the situation and hopefully work a compromise for the good of the public. So please do vote yes to form this SID today. Thank you again for your service and for listening to us in this hearing.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard?
Susan Thompson, Thomson, 1282 South 164th Street. I'm the liaison for the 164th Street project. I've been here before. Our SID 6880, and I'm not exactly an opponent. I am a proponent. And congratulations to this SID for moving forward. Franklin, it's good to see you. You are always welcome on our street. And thank you for taking such good care of us. I'm going to reference Section 4 in the PDF file that comes up on the, and may I just put one on the record and give you each a copy? Thank you. So that's for the record, and that's for each of the council members. Okay, point 4, I'm going to quote, that the Public Works Department is authorized to create the design for the improvements, prepare the engineer's estimate, solicit bids, and carry out other associated required actions to complete the project for this improvement district in accordance with the Omaha Municipal Code. Essentially what this is free city engineering for this project. And the SID 6880 fought tooth and nail in 2017 to get free city engineering. And we ended up with the imposition of having to pay for our engineering. And my reason for being here and representing our street today is with this question. Why should they have free city engineering when we have to pay? And I might reference Ryan on the Ridgewood project. Likewise, they are having to pay for engineering too. We did not know that E&A was going to be on our street. We did not know they were going to be doing the engineering. We caught them on the street doing the engineering and asked what they were doing. And then the next thing we know, we have a bill for $41,000 payable to our account when we were promised in 2016 at our August mayoral meeting that the city would be doing the engineering. So I'm here as a distraction and putting on the record with the question because we will not let this go. We are asking for free engineering, and I think the Ridgewood project likewise should ask for the same. I have nothing more to add. Congratulations to this SID, and I will let the matter rest. Thank you for your patience in this matter.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, I'd like to thank the Woolworth contingent for coming down today. I've walked the street earlier this year as a part of the election process, and other than the neighbor near the top on the south side of the street who built his own curb, I think the rest of you have had the water just come barreling in. It is a street that is in need of improvement, and I thank you and commend you for stepping up to accept this task and challenge and financial burden. There has been a policy of a cost share in the city that predated a proposed written policy. And as far as this council member is concerned, that'll continue to be the policy as I see it, that there will be continued cost share. Whether it's through resolution here at the council or as a Board of Equalization sitting to reduce your assessment by 50%, that is the course that I will take. And I would appreciate our council members who have supported the 50% cost share continuing to stand up for what is fair and right, because if they don't, I can assure you it'll wreak havoc on every single road project in this city as long as I'm here. So if there is a policy that people want to bring back and have it voted on again, bring it back. Happy to do it. But as long as there's parts of our city that the policy continues to overlook, and policies that don't afford people due process, then it's a policy in writing anyway that will continue to need refinement as far as I see it. But having said all that, I want you to know that's what my intentions are. And so I would make a motion to approve this one.
It's moved and seconded to approve item 16. Mr. Pauls.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Jerem, I just have a question. I agree because many of the streets have been improved in my district, and I voted for the 50. But what about the dollar? I mean, there's only so many dollars available, so how would you handle that? Let's say we have 5 of them. I just need some clarification.
The department has always taken the position that there's only so many dollars per year to do these, and with the money available, if you don't get it done this year, they push you back to the next year in the priority.
So in other words, it's a possibility, if we would approve it, that it may be several years before it's accomplished simply because of the funds.
I don't know about the timing of this one as it sits here today. It's the first step in a series of steps, but it would be hard for me to believe that the series of steps that remained, even if there were a written policy, that this one would get done in 2018 anyway.
Okay, thank you. I just have one question. When was this particular Woolworth Avenue part of it? You said it was ground down. Can you tell me the year that happened? Because does anybody know that year?
I believe it was 3 years ago.
Okay.
Plus or minus. Yeah.
Okay. So that's just what I need to know. 3 years ago. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Palermo.
Thank you, President. The same gentleman, could I have you come down for a second? I just had a quick question, too.
Your name?
Name and address for the record again, please.
Yes, Thomas Tape, 8023 Woolworth.
Thank you.
So thank you, and I know you said you lived in the neighborhood for roughly 20 years.
Moved in 97, correct.
And so 3 years ago is when the problem started, or there's always been the problem, or what leads you to this point now?
No, the street was fine in terms of drainage up until the time it was ground down. The problem was that about 3 years ago, the city declared that the potholes would no longer be repaired every spring. Up until then, the road was patched with asphalt on an annual basis, and it kept firm for about through the winter season, and then it needed to be refilled in again. And they essentially condemned the street, and they told the neighbors that our only option for the city to continue to maintain the street was to have it ground down. And the problem was that not only did they grind down the street, but they also ground down the essentially the speed bumps people had at the top of their driveways to keep the water out of their driveways and the gravel out of their driveways. So this is really a problem that was created after the city decided to grind the asphalt into gravel. Does that help?
That's exactly what I thought you said, and I just wanted to make sure that's what you were meaning to say.
Mm-hmm.
So you were fine with the unapproved road until we decided to reclaim it and grind it, and that's what caused you to be here today.
That is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further lights. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 16. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 16 is approved, 7-0. Item 17, an application to consider a change of location request for Blazing Wings, Inc., doing business as Buffalo Wild Wings 72, currently located at 14615 West Maple Road, with a change of location to 13214 West Maple Road.
Public hearing on agenda item number 17 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Puneet Kundra. I'm here to answer any questions regarding the permission to change locations.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 17. There are no lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 17 is approved, 7-0. Item 18, an application for Murchie LLC, doing business as Southern Spice Indian Restaurant, located at 5010 South 108th Street, for an addition to their Class C liquor license to add an area approximately 12 feet by 41 feet to the east and to change the trade name to Astoria Indian Restaurant.
Public hearing on agenda item number 18 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Prasad Kandimalla. I am the owner of Mirchi LLC.
I'm sorry?
I am the owner of Mirchi LLC.
Okay. And you're just here to answer any questions? You're just here to answer questions?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded to approve item 18. There are no lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 18 is approved, 7-0. Item 19, an application to approve Philip S. Morante as manager of Big Fred's Pizza, Inc., doing business as Big Fred's Pizza, to their Class C liquor license located at 1101-21 South 119th Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 19 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Philip Moranti, 7858 Poppleton, here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 19. There are no lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 19 is approved, 7-0. Items 20 and 21 can be considered together. Resolutions to approve lottery operator agreements with EHPV Lottery Services, LLC, for Crossbones Bar, 5611 South 36th Street, and Voodoo Lounge, 304 North 168th Circle, Suite 210.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 20 and 21 are today. Proponents, please.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, my name is Katrina Coffey. I'm Vice President of Marketing for Big Red Keno. We're located at 11248 John Galt Boulevard. I have with me today the two owners of the locations that are before you, and we just ask for your approval, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Second, roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 20 and 21 are approved, 7-0.
Thank you.
Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 22 through 24 were held on December 19th, 2017.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve items 22 through 24. No lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 22 through 24 are approved, 7-0.
The public hearing on agenda items numbers 25 through 56 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent. Withdraw numbers 48 and 51.
We need that motion.
So moved.
Second, roll call.
Festerson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is on
Mr.
This is on. This is to
Just
withdraw.
to
Yeah.
withdraw. Yeah, do those two.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0.
Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. Just wanted to note two items on the consent agenda, and they're fine. They're on there because I'm supportive of them. But first, wanted to acknowledge the Public Works Department on number 41, which is the continuing work they're doing to replace Omaha garage lighting with LED lighting improvements. This particular item today will save about $180,000 in lighting costs going forward in this particular garage, and I think is the right thing to do environmentally. So I appreciate their ongoing attention to that. And then wanted to engage Mr. Bench from the Parks Department on number 50 just for a second. We talked about this item in pre-council, but I know folks are following this project, so I wanted to just entertain it in our public meeting this afternoon too. So number 50 is the contract to perform renovation work to the Korea-Vietnam statue in Memorial Park, which will be a total replacement and renovation of what's currently there into a silicon bronze statue and material that will last longer, we believe. Mr. Bench, can you take a moment just to talk about that project and the timeline?
Sure. Brooke Bench, Parks and Recreation Director. We are the statue has been removed. Jensen has already started working, or they got it to they wanted to get it out before the inclement weather, and they have started working on that. We're hoping to have that completed in the February to March timeframe.
And all the nameplates and names of those being honored and commemorated will be renovated too and replaced as well, right?
That is correct.
And we have a private donor to thank for that, I believe.
That is correct.
And then the second part of that effort is to replace and renovate, I shouldn't say replace, but renovate the colonnade, World War II colonnade, in time for its 70th anniversary in 2018 as well. Can you give an update on that project too?
Yeah, we also have reached out to several other donors for that. We've had positive feedback on that. We're working on putting a new roof on the colonnade, then redoing all the cosmetics. All the surfacing would get redone. New walks would be completed to be ADA all the ADA requirements would be made to get to both of the colonnade and to the Vietnam Korean statue. So quite a few other upgrades that will be happening during that whole time, and hopefully we'll have all of that completed in late spring.
That'd be very welcome, and I know appreciated by everyone involved. The City Council also allocated $100,000 to that project through the budget process. You anticipate using that for either the colonnade or some of the work and the trail work and the replacement of the metal fence in front, and maybe some lighting too, as we discussed this morning. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're looking at the new walks, new fencing around the actual whole circle drive, really spiffing it up to make it look really good with all the work that's being done on both of those, from the colonnade and to the Korean statue.
Great. Well, I know you understand the importance of that, being a veteran yourself, so we appreciate all your work on that.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve, or has it been moved? Motion approved. Motion approved. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded to approve the rest of the items, except for the ones that were removed. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 57, a resolution to approve the Jukes Ale Works and Brew Pub Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located at 20560 Elkhorn Drive in an amount up to $259,850.
Public hearing on agenda item number 57 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Don Seaton on behalf of the City Planning Department. Let me start by orienting you. Okay, the Jukes Ale Works TIF project involves the construction of a new retail building on Elkhorn Drive. It's about a half block west of the Elkhorn Main Street. It'll be a two-story restaurant, kind of a microbrewery and pub, be of a glass and brick design, kind of reminiscent of the Blatts near TD Ameritrade Park. The owners are here today. They're Terry and Guy Jukes. They're lifelong residents of Elkhorn. Project cost is $2.3 million. Pardon me, I'm losing my voice. $2.3 million, and the TIF support they're requesting is $259,850. Public improvements include curb, gutter, and sidewalk in front of the building, and paving of the alleyway along the west side of the building. They will also be making a $7,500 contribution to the downtown Elkhorn sidewalk project. The project meets the required criteria of the TIF program, is appropriate land use for the site, and complies with city goals of the master plan. we ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon. Tom McClay, 3814 Farnham Street here in Omaha. I'm here as well with Guy Jukes, the owner and future proprietor of the Jukes Ale Works and Brew Pub. We believe this will be a really exciting addition to downtown Elkhorn, bringing what's a very big trend in micro beer or craft beer brewing, as well as food uses. And we'd ask for your support and are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Mr. Hardy.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Ben. Guy, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what's coming to Elkhorn, which I think is kind of exciting with all the other things going on in Elkhorn, some of the street and lighting project that we have going underway, and I know you'll be joining a number of other merchants in the area that know the value of the Elkhorn area.
Definitely. So it's be a family-run
Name
business.
and address for the record, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Edward Jukes, 265 South 216 Circle, Elkhorn. Is that it?
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Sorry. So my sons and I have been brewing for a little 6-7 years, and we've just kind of had this dream of opening a brewery. We've been talking about it for 6 or 7 years, and started working on it. He studied to be a brewer, brewed at Siebel Institute in Chicago, brewed it upstream for a while, and we just started doing more and more and got involved with the community and the beer geeks, if you will, the beer community in Omaha and all across the country actually. He has sent a lot of his home brews out all across for different competitions across the country, done very well, and so that really got us going, and that got my wife on board, seeing as we can actually have some success and do something as a family and that we enjoy and employ. We're looking at maybe 30 plus jobs, and just kind of depends. About 7,000 square foot building, rooftop patio, full kitchen, a little everything. So we've been in Elkhorn since the 70s. My wife and I, all, 3 sons, all graduated from Elkhorn. So we, lifelong community members, and looking forward to getting going here. So
Great.
A lot of work, but we'll have fun doing it too. So,
Thank you. Good luck.
thanks.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve item 57. There are no further lights, rather. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 57 is approved, 7-0. Item 58, a resolution to approve the Dundee Professional Building Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located at 119 North 51st Street in an amount up to $275,000.
Public hearing on agenda item number 58 is today. Proponents, please.
Yes, Don Seaton again on behalf of the City Planning Department. This TIF project entails a very thorough rehabilitation of a 4-story office building. It's located at 51st and Capitol. It's about a half block off of north of Dodge Street. The new owners looking at acquiring the building will completely replace the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems in the building. There's a picture of the building. It's a 1967 building. They will also update the interior finishes on all 4 floors. The building is a bit dated since 1967. The middle 2 floors have been vacant for a number of years. Also, the windows will be replaced. The exterior of the building will see some improvements, and asbestos will be removed from the building. The parking lot shows considerable wear. It will be improved as part of this project. Overall, I'd have to say the site looks really pretty good. There's a lot of mature landscaping. It's all been very nicely maintained. That landscaping will be retained. Much of that's in the right-of-way. It's a very attractive site. Total project investment is nearly $2.5 million. The developers are requesting $275,000 in TIF support. And again, with this one, the project meets the required criteria for the TIF program. It's an appropriate land use for the area, and it complies with the goals of the city's master plan. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Kendra Ringenberg, 1318 North 187th Street. I'm here representing the developer. I also have a representative from the developer if you have any questions for us. Thank you.
Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. Just wanted to note that I did meet with the developers on this project, and I'm fully supportive of this in my district, and I think it continues a great trend of reinvestment in this area, 46th to 50th Street or 51st, where we've seen a lot of great things happen, including where we had lunch today with Mr. Jerem at Film Streams, and then new apartments, and now this reinvestment in a long-time building. I think will continue that great trend. So thanks for your investment, and I'll move to approve.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, and since we're recognizing people in public service today, there is a member of the development team that is on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and so I want to thank her for her service.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 58. There are no further lights. Roll call.
I'll have to move it second next week, right? No, you're good.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 58 is approved, 7-0. Item 59, an ordinance approving a real estate purchase agreement with the Omaha Municipal Land Bank to convey 73 vacant parcels located throughout North Omaha and South Omaha neighborhoods in consideration of the sum of $22,200.
Public hearing agenda item number 59 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 60, an ordinance to approve the acquisition of property located at 3219 and 3221 Corby Street for the Consolidated Submission for Community Planning and Development Programs Fiscal Year 2017 Action Plan in the amount of $7,200.
Public hearing agenda item number 60 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 61, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for cutting and clearing weeds, grass, and worthless vegetation on certain lots in the City of Omaha, Group 2018-01.
Public hearing on agenda item number 61 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 62, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for cutting and clearing weeds, grass, and worthless vegetation on certain lots in the City of Omaha, Group 2018-02.
Public hearing on agenda item number 62 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 63, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for litter removal on certain lots in the City of Omaha, Group 2018-03.
Public hearing on agenda item number 63 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 64, an ordinance to approve an agreement with SHA Bank for claims administrative services for the City Health Savings Account for a term of 3 years with 2 additional one-year options at the city's sole discretion with a monthly service fee for employees of $1.75 per account until such account carries an average daily balance in excess of $3,000 for the initial 3-year term.
Public hearing on agenda item number 64 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Items 65 and 66 can be considered together for the Arbor Woods project located at 9300 Arbor Street. Item 65, an ordinance to approve an amendment to the land use element of the master plan for the City of Omaha to change the future land designation from open space to low density residential. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. B is communications in opposition. Item 66, a resolution to approve the Arbor Woods preliminary plat with a request for waivers of Section 53-84D lot frontage and Section 53-82B cul-de-sac length. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval with a request for waivers of Section 53-82B cul-de-sacs and Section 53-84D lot frontage. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend denial of a waiver of Section 53-99 regarding sidewalks.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 65 and 66 are today. Proponents, please.
Mr. President, council members. My name is Rick Anderson with the law firm of Croker Huck at 2120 South 72nd Street. I'm here representing the applicant owner of the property and for which the applications are supplied today. Here with me is Nate Dodge, representing the applicant owner. Members of the design team are also here with us in case there are any questions from Lamper Nearson, Joe Zadina, Caleb Snyder, and Matt Cruz, and from the ASD Stan Howe Associates Architecture firm, Stan Howe Jr. We're here on items number 65 and 66. We're understanding we're going to take them together. With respect to both items, Nate Dodge will give an overview of the project and the history of the project for the purposes of the plat and the amendment.
Thanks, Rick. President Gray, members of the council, I'm Nate Dodge, 8701 West Dodge Road. I know this has been in front of this group, but I want to give a brief overview and just a quick update of where we are. As many of you know, the golf course decided in June to disband and close. We were approached by Jim Maynor through Walt Slabotsky, who handles the lot development in our company. Walt asked if I knew about this area, and indeed I live roughly 7 blocks from it. And I'm very, very well acquainted with it. And actually, can you go out just a little bit? So, as you all know, this is a terrific area in West Side. West Side at one point was the west side of our city. It's now one of the central parts of our community. It's a great place to live and work. The development itself is at 90th and Center. The land itself is at 90th and Center right here. As you know, it's close to the Big Papio Creek and Trail, which one can get to Toll Park, One Pacific Place Park, Cancer Survivors Park, and Conoco Park. It's also really, really close to Sunset School, which is a brand new school, which will open in 2018. In addition to that, Sunset Pool is also in that area. And so we're pretty excited to make a try among the 20 different people apparently that they reached out to. When they did choose us, before we designed anything, we met with as many people as possible. We reached out to the neighbors, both in one-on-one meetings. We went to their homes. We went to the course itself. We had large group meetings, both with the members and with the neighborhood. And then we also received emails, phone calls, texts to hear what they wanted, what their concerns and thoughts were about the development. And 4 big themes emerged. And one could understand probably what those concerns are, which is, what is it going to look like in my backyard? So if we're a neighbor, what will we see? Will the apartments be right up against my home, like at 88th and Center, which is roughly 5 blocks away? If there are single family, will it be tract homes? Will they all look the same? And like 96th and Center, 96th and Center, which is about 3 blocks away, also has is a development that has one single builder, and there were some concerns about that. How many lots will there be? How many apartments will there be? There were floodplain concerns and also traffic concerns. So what's the density? How many cars will be going through our neighborhood? After all that, then we sat down with the city to see what the city had as far as ideas for the property, and only then did we then meet with Lamper Nearson, who is the engineer of the development, and then also Stan Howe, who is also our developer, and we came up with this concept. And there are 37 single-family lots, along with 210 apartments in the area. What we tried to do was, you'll see where we could, we tried to put tree buffers between the existing neighbors and then who the future neighbors will be. In addition to that, there's a tree-lined street with sidewalk, and then finally the apartment buildings. And so, and by the way, we try to do that in all cases, except you'll see on this northeast side, we were not able to do that. And on the north side, we were able to create a pretty big buffer zone between the lots and the existing neighbors. So you'll see where we could, we tried to create a tree buffer, and then after that, so the neighborhood is R2. We created then an R4 single-family buffer after that, and then sidewalk and tree-scaped street, and then from there, there's screening in front of the apartment buildings and what we're trying to do is we're trying to save as many of the old growth trees as we can and have those be planted kind of in some of the key areas, in particular in front of the apartments as well. The 37 single-family lots will have an array of builders, so people will be able to choose who those builders are. The smaller lots we're going to try to have be in the $80,000 range, larger lots in the $125,000 range. The apartments, we worked really closely with the Nebraska Biking Alliance. Because of its proximity to the Big Papio Trail, we are extraordinarily close to really great areas where people can work. You can get to One Pacific Place, you can get to Regency, where there's office buildings, and even TD Ameritrade is not too far away. So the apartments themselves will have internal bike lockers. There'll be garages in the buildings themselves. We've worked with the electric transportation partners in Lincoln for best practices of what charging stations could be in these apartments for electric cars. There'll be a workout facility, a pool, garages. And there's been talk about 49% of this. Oh, and here's a picture of the front. And then obviously the back with the garages underneath. There's been talk about that 49% of this is getting developed. Actually, 60% of it is going to stay the way it is, and this graphic shows what area is in green space, and that's 60% of the property will be in green space, and that doesn't account for any of the green space in the single-family lots or in the apartment buildings. We believe this is a walkable neighborhood. The developments that has occurred at 90th and Center is within bike riding and walking range. Also, the new school that is going to open up in 2018. We've talked to the superintendent of the schools, and we're working on a dedicated walkway that will be between the neighborhood and the schools so that people can not only go through the neighborhood to get to the school, but the people in the neighborhood itself in the new addition will be able to get to the school by walking. As you all probably know, if you go up Arbor Street, there's Westside Middle School, and then also Westside High School. And then finally, we believe that one will be able to ride their bike quicker to One Pacific Place and possibly TD Ameritrade than you can get there during rush hour traffic. In deference to your time, I wanted to be brief so that there's time for follow-up conversation. And in addition to the point, Rick would like to talk about the two other items that will be before you. Rick.
The two items before you are the amendment, the approval of a special amendment to the future land use element of the master plan. This would be done by updating the future land use map for the Sunset Valley Golf Course. It is currently shown as open space. That open space is no longer viable. Property as amended will be shown as low-density residential housing, the same as and consistent with neighbors to the north and east. It is also consistent in the multifamily with neighbors to the south and east. The necessity for this obviously comes, as Nate indicated from the closing of the golf course. It was closed for financial reasons. It was closed not because developers were harping on this project, but because they determined they couldn't maintain the viability any longer. With that, the highest and best use of this project was analyzed, and it seems to be consistent with the conversations with the Omaha City Planning Department, a low-density housing project. The predominant use is consistent with the neighboring properties. The property is being underutilized at present. It could become vacant, deteriorating, but its current condition is in need of redevelopment. The existing designation on the property as open space impairs that redevelopment, so we're asking for an amendment to the master plan. The amendment to the master plan is consistent with other master plan conditions and goals. And those are including, but probably not limited to, allowing the property to be more effectively used for additional single-family and low-density multifamily housing. This is using existing city infrastructure in all cases while retaining a substantial amount of open space. You've just seen that the open space, including the outlots to buffer the single-family to the north and east, are going to be constituting 60% of the approximate 49-acre parcel. The increase in tax base, it's projected that the tax base will be in the range of $40 million, I think, when it's completed. And this is in an area where nonprofits are moving in, taking over buildings, and having a negative effect on the tax base. Reasonably so, but nevertheless, it helps from that standpoint. Providing diversity of housing for the citizens of Omaha. Providing connectivity, a neighborhood that's walkable, that's rideable, that is close to existing transportation sources other than the single-family car. The city, you've seen the applications before you. You've seen the recommendation from the planning board. The planning department's recommendation probably gives a nice synopsis of this, and I'll give it to you quickly. The applicant has satisfactorily met the criteria for amending the master plan. The planning department concurs with the applicant's findings on how the proposal would further one or more aspects or goals of the master plan and its elements. These include more effective development of the site in order to provide a suitable and productive use of the property for residential purposes, using the existing infrastructure, retaining open space, increasing the tax base, and providing diversity of housing. The concept plan, the environmental plan, and the land use elements promote the development of new infill housing within the interstate loop and recommend that development be compatible with the surrounding area in density, scale, design, and use. We might state that all rooftops will be limited to the 35-foot scale that is the same limitation for all these neighboring properties. These elements are supportive of low-density residential development in the addition of other housing options and the continuation of open space as permitted. I might say that after a 2-hour public hearing on this and the next matter, the planning board, under the tutelage or under the direction of Arnold Nesbitt, voted unanimously, that was 5-0 with 2 recusals for possible conflicts, voted to recommend this amendment to the master plan. Now, the second element we're here for is item number 66, which is approval of the preliminary plat of Arbor Woods subdivision. Nate has laid out how that plat is structured. Plat's gone through the city planning department meetings and approval process. Again, the city planning department supports and approves our request subject to 12 conditions. Now, those conditions can be significant at times, and we've reviewed and prepared to meet all of them. Several have been raised continuously in discussions in the planning board meetings as well as in meetings with council members, I'm sure. Item number 4 of the conditions is the traffic. We have to have an acceptable traffic study. We've proposed a traffic. We've provided a traffic study. It's been updated and amended as a result of public meetings and hearings. That has been submitted, and it's under review by the city Public Works Department. The stormwater management, of course, is always a matter for development. That's a significant item, and it's being developed as we move forward from the preliminary plat. Excuse me. The floodplain development permit for the proposed fill is condition number 11 and 12. That is under, it's presently being worked on. We've had meetings with the planning department and the NRD to discuss the procedures, the elements, the criteria that will be reviewed, and the computer module methodology that they request be supplied. That is in the works as well, but that's an element of the submission of the final plat for approval at that time. So we want to say that with these items, we request that you allow us to move forward with the preliminary plat, subject to the approval of these items at the time the preliminary plat is submitted, or the submission for final approval of the final plat is approved. I might note, before we close the proponent's presentation, this is a development that is not requesting TIF. It's not requesting occupation tax. The developer will be providing the amenities, the improvements. The single-family housing is consistent with housing throughout the area. It acts as a buffer and a natural progression to the low-density multifamily housing. We are retaining 60% of the open space, and it seems like a happy resolution of a former golf course that is now no longer in use. With that, we request your approval, and we would request time to respond to comments that may come from the neighbors.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
First of all, thank you to the members of the City Council for hearing our statements today. My name is Charlie Likas. I've lived at 1303 South 91st Avenue in the Sunset Hills neighborhood for the past 12 years. Previously, I lived for 10 years at 1520 South 93rd Avenue, also in the Sunset Hills neighborhood. 11 years ago, I opened my business in the office complex on the south end of the Sunset Hills neighborhood at 2580 South 90th Street, 1 block southeast of Sunset Valley Golf Club and the proposed Arborwood subdivision development project. My wife and I together served 3 terms as Community Club President at Sunset Hills School. My wife is on the building committee for the new Sunset Hills Elementary School and the district rebordering committee created due to the increase in size of Sunset Hills School. I served for 9 years on the Sunset Hills Pool Board, 2 of which were as president of the pool board. I was a long-term member of Sunset Valley Golf Club, serving on its membership committee.
Hi there. My name is Andy Likas. I have lived at 9160 Shirley Street for 6 years. I previously lived at 1304 South 96th Street for 4 years and 3301 South 91st Street for an additional 10 years. Our home, a home our family still owns today. My wife co-owns a restaurant with our mom, located at 2501 Arbor Street, previously located at 911 South 87th Ave across from Westside High School. The restaurant has been a staple of the District 66 community for 32 years and counting. For 28 years, our parents have lived at 8723 Hickory Street in the Loveland neighborhood and have owned the property on 91st Street for 20 years. My wife and I together served on the Sunset Hills Community Club for 3 years. I served on the board of directors at Sunset Hills Pool for 3 years. My family have been members of Sunset Valley Golf Club for over 20 years, and our father served on the board of directors for several years, holding numerous positions on the board. Okay. Together, our families have resided in Sunset Hills for over 30 years, owned and resided at Loveland and Paddock Homes for an additional 48 years, and have a long history of volunteerism in our community. We give you this history so that you understand each of our personal investments to the Sunset Hills and adjacent neighborhoods within District 66.
As Sunset Hills residents, we've been following the discussion of development of Sunset Valley Golf Course since before the sale of the property to MP Dodge. We've attended events hosted by MP Dodge as well as by those opposed to the development. We raised questions to those opposed and those in favor of the development, ensuring we were hearing all perspectives of the development of Sunset Valley Golf Club. We also spoke in support of the proposed development at the Planning Board meeting in October 2017. I served as membership chair for Sunset Hills Pool and was also a member of the membership committee at Sunset Valley Golf. We developed heavily incentivized programs with the area pools such as Sunset Hills, Rockbrook, Westridge, and Westgate pools, hoping to attract young members to join the course. We waived initiation fees for a period of time and promoted the payment of pool dues for new golf course members. We still cannot attract young members. The golf course was doing everything they could to try and stay viable, but the demand and interest from members of the community was just not there.
The Arborwood Subdivision Opposition Group has stated to have an interested third party who is willing to purchase the land so that it may be maintained, can be maintained as a neighborhood green space. We would all love to have this area to become public green space, but we have several concerns about the development of said green space. First, why didn't the city first come forth and acquire the land back when Sunset Valley Golf Club and develop it back into a park? The reason is that just across the creek from Sunset Valley is Toll Park, owned and managed by the City of Omaha. Second, what are the costs of transforming the golf course property into a public green space? What are the annual costs of maintaining the green space property so that it lives up to the standard looking like the green space people are accustomed to, or have hopes of it becoming? We all remember how quickly the Skyline Golf Course went from beautiful to dilapidated after it closed. It didn't take years, it just took mere months. How is this green space going to be managed? As an open green space in the middle of Omaha that is not an Omaha-owned park, how long will it take before members of our society begin to use this as their personal space after hours? How often is that, that it is private property and police or security presence is minimal? How often is the City of Omaha going to send police in to patrol this private space? Once it is realized that it is private property and police or security presence is minimal, this area could become a haven for vandalism, partying, prostitution, and drug trafficking. See Toll Park. From a financial standpoint, this deal needs to happen. Leaving this property as a park, as opposed to developing it into a tax-generating property and gaining the estimated $44 million in taxable base cannot be ignored. Those opposed to the Arborwoods development will state that this amount is overstated, according to their study of 2001 about declining values of area properties after a golf course closes. While the study may be relevant in some areas of the United States, we do not feel it to be true in this neighborhood. According to the MLS, through November 2017, homes in the Sunset Hills neighborhood were on the market for 12 days average. While the City of Omaha averages are 28 days, Nationally, homes took 85 days on average in the month of December to close, to sell, and homes in the Great Plains region sell on average of 25 days. Demand for homes in the District 66 area is unlike the national average, oftentimes selling within days and without even putting a sign in the front yard. Each of the houses our families have purchased, and the District 66 homes our parents own, were purchased before the sellers listed their homes on the open real estate market. This is a common trend with homes for sale in many District 66 neighborhoods. Recently, Blue Cross Blue Shield sold their property to Allegiant. HDR also announced the sale of their property located within District 66, and both located within District 66. The sale reduces the taxable base of our school district by over $40 million. Without the tax revenue generated by the Arborwoods development, this district has no way to recoup what has been lost by the sale of the HDR and the Blue Cross Blue Shield properties. Personally, we would much rather have our schools receive the tax benefit of this development and continue to be able to provide all of its current services rather than having to cut services and staff because of the loss of these property taxes. This becomes a trade-off of having a neighborhood green space versus having district-wide art, music, and additional cultural development programs and the staff necessary to support these programs at all of our district schools. We have already lost foreign languages at our district elementary schools. What else do we stand to lose if the tax shortfall is not recovered? We will always favor cultural development, educational advancement, and teachers for our schools.
Mr. Lyko, so you're about to wrap up. We've got a lot of people want to talk today. And I, fairness to them, I have a flight, so I want to make sure I get to hear everybody.
Thank you. Assuming the approval of the project by this developer, What better developer to do this project than MP Dodge? Sandy and Kate Dodge, Nate and Megan Dodge, Laura and Mike Luther all live within the district. They have continuously invested their time and efforts in making the community and our school district one of the best in the nation. If a developer from another state had won this contract, would they have the vested interest in making sure this development was consistent with the standards and ideals of our district and area neighborhoods? This is one of the many reasons why MP Dodge is the perfect developer for this project. Not only do they have the ability to do it, but they have the desire to do it the right way. While we'd all love to continue to have the green space available in our neighborhood, we recognize the practical and financial reasons for this development and are excited that MP Dodge, truly a District 66-led business, is leading this development. Thank you for your time and consideration regarding the Arborwood subdivision.
Okay. Charlie?
Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Girls first. I'm Diane Poots from 9351 Walnut Street.
I'm Jeff Poots, 9351 Walnut. We've lived there for 31 years. Go ahead.
We would love to have the space remain as a golf course, but we know that that's no longer possible. The golf course is gone and leaving. With that being said, and the Toll Park across the way, Happy Hollow just also across the creek, and then the way that we have a great developer that's willing to go in and make a development that he's trying to make as close to fit into the neighborhood as possible and still increase our tax base. I think that that would be a great thing for the City Council to approve. We just think it's the best option that's currently available with that land.
Having lived there 31 years, I'm not a golfer, never been a member of the golf course, but it was no surprise to me when the golf course announced it was closing. You could just see by the diminishing number of rounds that were played each year that it was not going to go forward as a golf course. So that was not a surprise to me, but what was a surprise to me was that once it closed, how quickly non-members or public trespassers took it over. We had a nice stretch of weather in early December, late fall weather, and the course closed approximately November 30th, and within days you had people riding their bicycles and walking dogs across there. I suppose they weren't doing any harm, but I thought if you extrapolate forward, if this is in fact a public or private green space, unless it's actually secured, owned by somebody and secured, it's going to be, there'll be the possibility of being the antisocial behavior, the type of behavior we've seen over at Toll Park. And quite frankly, we live right next door to Sunset Hills School, and there was some snickering in the audience when the term drug trafficking came up, but we've seen any number of times the car pulls up, the money comes in the window, something comes out the window, we call the police, but by the time the police get there, they're gone. So unless the property is owned and secured by someone, we simply don't see it as a good thing for our neighborhood, for my backyard, and we're just tickled that Nate has come forward with a plan that we can approve of, that we agree with, and we've even talked casually about maybe selling our house and moving over into one of his. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? If I could, before we get started, if they're going, how many opponents plan to speak? At least how many?
About 10 or 15.
About 10 or 15. If you could line up or come close so that we're not wasting a lot of time. If you want to come and line up, we'll. And if you could try not to repeat what has already been said, it would benefit all of us as we move forward. So, with that caveat, those who are in opposition, the microphone is yours.
Sure, thank you. My name is Sheila Karp, 9213 Hickory Street. President Gray and members of the City Council, thank you for allowing the Sunset Hills neighborhood an opportunity to make our voice heard before you today. My husband, 2 young children, one of which was here earlier, you may have seen, live one house away from 93rd Street, the street that NP Dodge has proposed to extend into its development and push more cars onto that street every day without sidewalks. With Don Geiger, I help lead our neighborhood watch group and our neighborhood association in Sunset Hills. In the interest of time, Rich Onken and I will cover the majority of what we have to say, but we do have a few other people who are going to speak really briefly, hopefully without repetition to respect your time. So We will cover issues related to flooding, traffic, public safety, and density. In addition to support for maintaining this green space, we will also address how we are still awaiting answers to numerous questions that we have not gotten answers to, and finally many errors and a lack of transparency and even unreadability of documents that are on the City Council's website today lead us to believe that we don't even have a full picture of what is being voted on today. So I will discuss a few of those errors in addition to a summary of kind of our traffic concerns. But before then, I just wanted to mention that we are here today representing not just a few people, but over 1,300 people on our petition. A lot of people jumped into this and signed after they learned that this could be conserved as a public park with opportunities for community gardens, wetlands, a dog run, a handicap accessible playground. And they're really excited about those opportunities. There's also an opportunity to donate the clubhouse to the Omaha Police Department to have that space for school resource officers or for other uses. The donor that's come forth is interested in that, and so that would hopefully cut down on any crime. Because I help lead our watch group in Sunset Hills, we've lived next door to a lot of crime that actually former Councilman Thompson helped us out a lot on, so thank you for that. And we were concerned about the drug deals that were going on at the school. They were going on up the hill from us as well. And this is primarily due to our rental house next door to us. And so a lot of people have offered up ideas about maybe condos or other opportunities for this development to cut down on some of that transient nature of people who aren't invested in our neighborhood. We also took a poll. There was around 84% of people who are opposed to this development, primarily in Sunset Hills, as you can see here, but also all across Omaha and every city council district. We have signatures on our petition from the heads of the Loveland and Fair Acres Neighborhood Associations, the Fair Acres Homeowners Association, the Southwest Omaha Neighborhood Alliance, and many others. We have neighborhood associations that have signed our coalition letter, including the Metcalf-Harrison Neighborhood Association, Sunset Hills Neighborhood Association, Willow Wood, and Highland South Indian Hill Neighborhood Associations. There are many more. I could continue to go on, but I sent those ahead of time for the public record. And so I will go into a few of the errors that we've seen in the documents that are before you today. So documents on the City Council's website right now reference a PUR, not a PUD. So a planned unit redevelopment instead of a planned unit development, which was voted on at the second planning board hearing. The City Planning Department's recommendation letter to the City Council dated December 12, 2017 indicates that the department's recommendation for today is for approval of the rezoning from Development Reserve to Development Reserve R4 and R6, subject to approval of an acceptable final PUR plan. But again, the plan that was approved at the second planning board hearing was a PUD, not a PUR. That was on page 1 of this document. Page 2 says, in the development proposals section, it indicates lot 38 is proposed for R6/PUR zoning, again, instead of a PUD. This document also states a PUR planned unit redevelopment overlay district plan accompanies this request. However, the planning board, as I mentioned, approved the other one. This issue has been a source of confusion for us and is an issue that we raised at the last planning board hearing but have not really yet gotten a full answer to. Other city documents reference both a PUD and a PUR in the same document, again creating more confusion for us. And the public was not aware of why this change happened, but we have seen city emails through a public records request that show that the city itself did not believe that this met its PUR criteria, and so then a PUD was pursued instead. Also, in just briefly mentioning a few other errors, page 4 of the proposed ordinance to amend the land use element of the master plan indicates in the map that the Sunset Hills Elementary School is open space, but this was recently rezoned to R4. That's another error in a document that is before you today. The planning board hearing minutes from the November 1st hearing are also incorrect, and I can hand over our list of changes that need to be made to them, but we don't believe that you've had the right information in front of you today to make this decision. There's also typos, errors. Giles Road was referenced in the first traffic study, and an incorrect speed limit on West Center Road was referenced in the first traffic study, and this just kind of tells us, did anyone proofread this? You know, traffic is one of our major concerns. That's why a lot of people are here today. And it just says to us, is this being rushed? Are our questions being answered? We would urge you to help us get those answered before we move forward. An example of NP Dodge's application being rushed also is the PUD application being sent to the city, from what we can tell, 4 days later than the November 6th deadline for submissions for the December Planning Board hearing. We've also had a lot of unanswered questions that I've mentioned. Rich Onken will discuss a few more of them. Just wanted to mention a few briefly. We have still not received answers to our questions, at least full answers that came up during our meeting with a few of you on December 19th. We're also wondering, should NP Dodge's PUD application be considered a new application or an updated one? This was, again, something else that was brought up earlier that we haven't gotten an answer to. We've asked for the Planning Board public record from the 2 Planning Board hearings. We have not gotten a response on that. We've asked for a meeting with the traffic department. We have been denied that. And really, we've just kind of feel like we've been brushed off. A lot of the neighbors behind me and other people watching on TV today have posed a lot of questions that we don't feel like we've gotten good answers to. And I'll just go into a little bit of on traffic. So the proposed development will triple or even quadruple traffic on our neighborhood streets that lack sidewalks. NP Dodge's traffic study from November estimates 1,941 additional daily trips through our neighborhood, when our streets currently only have around 260 or 700 daily trips. Traffic per acre will increase around 3 times as well. This will put children's lives, such as my own 2-year-old and 4-year-old, at risk walking and biking to and from the Papio Trail, the elementary school, and the Sunset Hills pool. Given the unique location of this property, NP Dodge has proposed only 2 entrances and exits, again, one of which would extend 93rd Street southward. We found no other apartment developments in Omaha that push traffic through a neighborhood with no sidewalks, and we're concerned that this could set a very dangerous precedent. NP Dodge's engineers also initially said that less than 5% of traffic would come through our neighborhood via 93rd Street, but this estimate is now up to 20% depending on which map you're looking at, and we're wondering, will it go higher? Either way, even if the traffic is going out Arbor, it's still going out of street, going by homes with no sidewalks. And I think a gentleman spoke about that at the last planning board hearing. He lives there or owns a home there, is concerned about that as well. Some have suggested that children living in the development would primarily walk to school. However, a traffic study conducted for the Sunset Hills Elementary School expansion showed that only 10% of kids walk to school. NP Dodge has indicated at least once that it's concerned about this issue, but neighbors are dismayed that nothing has been done yet to mitigate any of our concerns related to this primary issue. And they themselves are asking for a sidewalk waiver, which the city has opposed from what we can tell. We've also been told that our neighborhood already has a traffic problem, but this would put us over the edge, leading to traffic calming devices potentially put in that we as taxpayers would have to pay for, while NP Dodge is potentially the one making money from this development. Our neighborhood was successful in the 1980s in ensuring that the One Pacific Place apartment traffic did not come through our neighborhood with no sidewalks, taking the case to the Nebraska Supreme Court, and we will continue to ensure that we put public safety first. I won't go through all of the other alternatives that we've offered up to NP Dodge, but there have been several, and I can submit those for the record. We're not just coming in here saying absolutely no. We have offered a lot of other alternatives that have not yet been accepted. So in conclusion, we respectfully request that you deny or at least delay votes on the amendments to the master plan and approval of the preliminary plat until our questions have been answered. Primarily related to, again, traffic, public safety, flooding, etc. And at a minimum, we'd like to at least be able to read the documents online before a vote is taken. Thank you very much for your time.
My name is Richard Onken. I'm at 1715 South 94th Street. I've previously testified at both November and December planning board meetings on this topic, and I've submitted 4 letters in total to the city on this. The items that I'm bringing up here today are primarily related to the compliance requirements that the city should be reviewing. In broad brush, I really want you to not necessarily look at me calling into question the city. We're asking and we're saying, look, you guys are rushing this. Take some time, go through this. This is a major development. When I was in the Air Force, it didn't matter whether I had 4 projects or 18 projects on my docket. I still only had 40 hours in the week, okay? That's all I could do. So that's what I'm asking for. So if it feels like when I bring these things up, I'm bringing them up to say that somebody hasn't done their job, I'm not. I'm saying go through this in more detail. Take more time. So I'll try to run through this fairly quickly. I'm trying to be respectful of your time, and I do appreciate the opportunity sincerely to be before you today and speak. Some of the items that I've brought up is that Table 55-885 requires that an architectural opinion be rendered on the development. Also, a civil engineer should normally review stormwater matters. These 2 items kind of come from some statements that were made by an individual within the planning department who called this development a standard issue garden apartment complex, and he noted that we were missing opportunities to make this, placemaking, basically, trying to make this interesting. When I was at my office earlier this week, a guy said to me, "Hey, Rich, I found your apartments that are going to get built next to your house." And I said, "Oh, well, where are they? What street are they on?" He says, "Oh, no, they're in San Antonio." So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to. Can we come up with something even a little bit better when I bring up these architectural opinions that I'm talking about? Definition of redevelopment, I know that some of you might be saying, well, this waiver is that's something in the Planning Zoning Board of Appeals. It's not, because our core issue on this is that we don't feel that this is a redevelopment, and therefore the city planning director does not actually have the authority to issue that waiver. And so that's part of the reason why this went to the city attorney. So again, I'm trying to go fairly quickly through this. We've talked about important documents related to the preliminary plat and other drawings have not been issued to the public in a readable format. Some things can be done to go through drawings quickly when they are done in a readable format. We can search them, for example. We all do that with documents, right? Put a search on them. We can't do that on these documents. These documents, through this entire process, whether it's the November board meeting or the December board meeting, or even on the city council website as of 11/08, these are not searchable documents, they're not readable documents. It makes things purposefully difficult for us. And in today's electronic age, I'm sorry, but this should be able to be done. And I don't know, whether this is city council, or not city council, a city planning department that I'm saying should deal with this, or Lamprey or something. I really don't know. But I don't care. I'm having a hard time going through this. And I'm an architect licensed in California. I mean, I generally know what I'm doing with this stuff. What about the general public? So that's what I'm asking for here, is that the general public be afforded their option to read and review and understand these documents. So through this process also, we've had a lot of challenges with the correct designation of areas, and I continue to feel that there's been a lot of flippant kind of analysis here where R4 designations of the surrounding community was shown on this drawing, for example, and R4 was shown where R2 flood fringe is, and where flood fringe is, that's where flooding can happen. And so when you read this document, it almost feels like that document is going to, be commensurate. All this is going to be, in compliance with each other. So development within a flood fringe, 25% fill limitation. So I know there's going to be some of you that are going to say, oh, this is just something that the NRD, they need to weigh in on this. The reason why I'm bringing this to you is not that it's an NRD issue. This is in the city municipal code. So if it's in the city municipal code, that's a part of the process that we're in here. If this was not in the city municipal code, then, I wouldn't possibly bring this up. We would bring it up only to the NRD or something if it was only in their purview. But this is in the city municipal code. We have to follow this. I didn't create this language. Somebody else did. So back in the December planning board, I brought up this issue, and so we went back through and we found where this language came from. And this is from a 2009 when City of Omaha entered into an interlocal agreement with up to 10 other municipalities along the Papillion Creek watershed. The root issue was stated: natural areas are diminishing, and there is a need to be proactive and integrate efforts directed towards providing additional landscape and green space areas with enhanced stormwater management through restoration and conservation of stream corridors, wetlands, and other natural vegetation. Okay, that is what this development is. It's trying to develop a natural area as described in this interlocal agreement. So as a result of that root issue, the following was included, and this is very similar language, as you can see, that's in the city municipal code. And then it also included this graphic, which talks about the 25% not being an area dimension. It's a linear dimension across the floodway and the flood fringe. So by 2012, Omaha Municipal City Code had contained the language in the 25% fill limitation. So this is what the city municipal code says. This on the top is development reserve, and on the bottom it talks about the flood fringe, and the remaining 75% of flood fringe within the project area shall be designed as a restricted fill zone. These provisions may be waived or modified or waived in whole or in part by the planning director for redevelopment areas, or if the project was previously zoned and platted. So just yesterday, Mr. Fanslau brought up two properties. There are 9503 Walnut Street and 8260 Grover Street, which were examples of how this process has been used properly before. I agree, in those cases, this was done properly. Those were redevelopment. What's on those sites? There's a building, there's a school, there's a parking lot, a huge parking lot over probably 80–90% of the 8260 Grover Street lot. That's redevelopment, no dispute. Arbor Woods is development. Arbor Woods is subject to the 25% fill limitation by City of Omaha Municipal Code. We've gone through this with our newly hired legal representation. Our newly hired legal representation so far is saying, yeah, by all my research, you're correct. So this is from the December meeting minutes, and I just wanted to highlight that Ms. Rockwell stated in the meeting minutes that the planning director had the authority to waive the 25% with regard to development. Now, it's always possible that Ms. Rockwell genuinely just missed her words. She's here today. I don't blame her if she did. But it still is the thing of, this is a confusing issue. Is this a development or is this redevelopment? That's what was stated and is in the record in the December planning board minutes. So why is there no consistent answer on why this is considered redevelopment? The floodplain manager said, hey, I've got a definition of development. That tells me what redevelopment is. How is that possible? Ms. Rockwell says, well, it was a previously commercial site. Mr. Fanslau said, well, it's development reserve and therefore a residential district. no one lives there, so I don't know how that's possible that it's a residential district. So the point isn't to blame these individuals. These individuals are operating without a definition. It's not surprising that we're getting different impressions of what this is. If somebody asks me, I might have a different opinion too, and that's what's going on here. So with the lack of a definition within the city municipal code, this is what happens. So what flood map is being used?
Let me stop you just for a second. Are
Yes, sir.
you getting ready to come and get close to the end here? Because I know you've got a number of people that are going to speak behind you.
I have 2 or 3 more slides, sir.
Okay.
So this is just showing, and this is confirmed with NRD, that they're mixing in their preliminary plat to you, they're mixing their flood fringe lines and their calculation basically. So with the existing flood zones, there's 41.29 total acres. With the projected flood zone that was shown at one time through a calculation is 34.65. And they're mixing in the final that they're presenting to you, and it's 26.17 total acres. So NRD has confirmed they shouldn't be using the projected flood zone map, and they are. In the interlocal agreement, it talks about this linear dimension. So we're at 62% encroachment if we go on the linear dimension. So that's 62% encroachment. We're only leaving 38%, much more than the 49.5. And we talk a lot about these setbacks, and if we push the setbacks on this development and we push the sidewalk standoff of 6.5 feet, then that's what occurs. We're up to 65%. So what Mr. Dodge has talked about in the discussion he gave was that it was 60% open space. That's different. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about fill. Fill is what we're talking about. When he tells you the 60%, he's including things like the retention ponds. Okay, sure, but the retention ponds are part of the fill calculation. So I'm going to go into one other issue. In due deference to your time. This is a very private item. A group of individuals who have risen in opposition to Arbor Woods development have endured some sharp criticism from many sides, imputing the character of those who have stood in opposition. Statements have been made that we don't respect the planning board, planning department, developers team. I've tried personally to always be respectful, sorry, I'm mixing my words, in this process, but I'm going to turn to a hard issue to talk about in order to further your understanding that this is not necessarily a group of people that are simply sore over the loss of the golf course, that they never supported anyway, or are just anti-development. There is reason and logic to why we say what we say, and that our characters should not be questioned. If we could get this turned on, please, sir. Thank you. I can almost guarantee that 99 out of 100 people in this room do not know this about me. This was me 21 years ago while stationed at RAF Lakenheath Air Base in England. My firstborn son was struck by his school bus in a tragic traffic accident. This is the article about that accident. I was called by the security forces desk sergeant and ran from my work location to the base all the way. Sorry, phone's screwing up here. Yeah. Okay. I was called by the security forces desk sergeant and ran from my work location to on the base all the way to the accident, about 1 mile, running in my military uniform complete with combat boots. He lasted long enough for me to be transported first to the base hospital and then on to Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, where he died in their accident and emergency department. He is buried here in Omaha at Cavalry Cemetery. How does such things stay with you? It is different for everyone, I imagine. It has been different for my wife and me. The incident happened in 1996 when I was 7 years in the military. For the next 13 years, whenever I would run in my combat boots, whether it was to catch a train or a shuttle bus at the Pentagon after a meeting, running across a field to a shot-up Saddam Hussein sign in Rashidiyah, Iraq, or running in the Ralston Parade fun run in my combat boots, I would remember that day. Be transported back, reminded. I have rarely, if ever, said this to anyone. It is not like I would break down and cry after I would run in my boots. It was just held in my soul. But the point is, with the death of a child, another continuous sore that I have from the loss of my child is traffic safety for children. This sore calls to me at these times right now to do something, reminding me that it is my duty to be an advocate for traffic safety with children especially. Put simply, I don't want another parent to go through what I went through if it can be prevented. I'm going to skip some of my testimony in deference to your time. When a memorial was constructed at RF Lakenheath for my son, I did not speak about bus safety. Much had already been done to improve safety at this busy street near the entry to the base. But I talked about how wonderful people can truly be towards one another during these times. My simple question today is, why do we need something like this to happen again? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other opponents?
Thank you, Rich. Henry Karff, 9213 Hickory Street. Again, traffic is one of the biggest issues, and there's a personal story about that, right? Why do we want to choose a development to do something like that? I'm going to talk about the modification of the master plan, which is one of the large things in front of you today, right? The master plan, here's a definition from the City of Omaha's website, right? The master plan represents the overall vision of Omaha and has two fundamental purposes. First, provides an essential legal basis, yada, yada, yada. Omaha must be a community committed to promoting and maintaining a high quality of life for all of its people, not just one developer who wants to build a development. So from their master plan amendment factual background, I will talk about some of these facts that they present and argue with these facts, right? That's what we're all here about, is we're opponents to this. So applicant believes the existing DR and DRFF zoning for this property is no longer appropriate because, this is direct quotes from their master plan, their supporting evidence, right? Existing use as a golf course is being terminated for financial reasons. False. Mr. Likas said how they tried to recruit people and get people to join the golf course. We had countless people in the neighborhood try to join the golf course and they just rejected them and said no. Is that against their nonprofit bylaws? Possibly, right? Number two here, the flood fringe designation of the property will be revised in a manner to allow further development of the property. So that's saying we're going to change it, and it's not appropriate because we're going to change it? It doesn't make sense to me. The predominant neighborhood use is for single-family and low-density multifamily residential. They really try to push the low-density multifamily residential to say that the R6 is going to fit in, when in fact 24 out of 575 homes in our Sunset Hills neighborhood are multifamily. That's 4%. I don't know if that's predominant. The property is being underutilized and will become vacant or deteriorating and obsolete. Rick Anderson, excuse me, sorry, at the first planning board meeting when they talked about this, talked about how awful and terrible Skyline is, right? Mr. Likas brought that up again today, how awful and terrible Skyline is. We'll talk to Gus Von Ron, we'll hear from him briefly about how that's not a terrible thing, right? So another thing we really want to hit home on is the density of this neighborhood, right? So density, currently, if you look at this outline here, which is what I consider real math, but we'll look at what the math the developer is using here in a little bit too, right? 2.1 homes per acre is the average size in our neighborhood because we're all R2 in that neighborhood predominantly, right? So lots are 0.33 to half an acre, right? The proposed development, overall, it's 12.92 units per acre. That's including, as they say, they're only developing 19 acres, right? They're leaving 60% of it open. So you have 6 times the amount of density, right? So 12.92 units per acre. The PUD, PUR, whatever the heck it is, the density of that property alone is 11 times the density, right? 210 units over only 9 acres. Their argument is, hey, let's include the adjacent green space, right? So if we include their developer math, yes, it's 6.67 units per acre. You take their 247 units divided by 37 acres, which is the amount of developable land not in the floodway, which you can't develop. It's still 3.9 times the density if you use the developer math on our neighborhood and you include things like all the parks you're talking about. I didn't even include, we could include Happy Hollow if they consider that green space for our use. Toll Park. If we included all that, we'd probably be around 1 home per acre in our neighborhood, and they're proposing 6.67 if you consider all of the open green space they're going to develop. So again, just surrounding zone, this goes to my point of 96% of surrounding homes are R2, low density. The current amendment in front of you, right, is an ordinance to approve an amendment to the land use element of the master plan for the city of Omaha to change the future land designation from open space to low density. The only place you can find low density anywhere in the municipal code is R2, which our entire neighborhood is, and this R6, low density multifamily, right? Our entire neighborhood basically is low density R2. If you look at the definition of R4 here, high density, the planning department states that anything less than 14 is low density, which if you look at my previous slide, they technically fit in. I cannot find a definition of that 14 anywhere in the municipal code. So if you could point me to that, that would be great. And you can see here, this screen is terrible here. The R4 district is appropriate for established neighborhoods in the city, particularly those exhibiting relatively small lots and in newly developing areas. So that's not where our neighborhood is. Valuations, the big change for this master plan is we need more money, right? What city doesn't want to hear? We will create more money, more jobs, right? Jobs. So this is from their application, right? So they're saying that lots 1 through 19, which are these smaller single-family homes, R4, you can see another error in their application here, but they're estimating $8 million of valuation for 19 homes, $425,000. The average home price, Mr. Dodge didn't know this when he first started talking to neighbors in the neighborhood about this, and our neighborhood is $238,000. He said, I think this will increase the value of your home prices. What is our home price? He didn't know. So here's the answers for him here. So, right? So $425,000 for a home, so 2 times the valuation on a lot, half the size. And then also the lots 20 through 37, $13.5 million for 18 homes, or a $750,000 house, 3 times the valuation for homes on lots that are the same size in the neighborhoods now. I've seen 2 lots sit in our neighborhood that are even bigger than these lots, almost double the size of these $750,000 homes, sit there for 4 years before they were sold. Where else in Omaha, again, can you find me a $750,000 house across the street from a market rate apartment within, meters of the floodplain, right? So if you can point that to me, that'd be great too. I think Mr. Like has kind of shot down this idea, we've brought this up at the first planning board, Mr. Onken did over there. Homes within 1,500 feet would lose $21 million in value due to the conversion from green space to apartments. Nate Dodge is keen on saying, this is national numbers, we don't realtor numbers, whatever, but they quote realtor numbers a lot on their website. When they sold this to us, right, so positive and negative effects of the difference also from their application. This amendment of the future land use map will not cause any negative effects to this area. They made this statement before there was a final traffic study, final floodplain study, all these final things, right? They're making a final change to the master plan that serves all citizens of Omaha without having any data, right? It's just, hey, bam. So when they sold to the planning board, this is a quote from Brian Haas, I think, or whomever from the engineer. Traffic would use signalized 90th and Arbor. He explained that a recent neighbor meeting, neighbors expressed concern for traffic on 93rd Street, and that studies revealed use of 93rd Street was estimated to be under 5%. So in 1 month, when they updated their right numbers and got the appropriate information in there, the number already has jumped up to 20%. When they modify that more, will that be going up even more? Who knows, right? So we do not feel that they have met that. Flooding, we've already heard about that from Rich and others. More from their application. Again, the amendment will not adversely affect the adjacent properties or land uses. First, I want to hear from Gus Von Ron about how terrible and awful Skyline is, as that's an example of what we're being pointed to. So we'll hear from him, then we'll hear from Emily Bailey about how her property will be directly affected by this, right? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next opponent.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a prepared statement that's only be about a minute long, but I am going to address a few issues.
Name and address for the record first, please.
So my name is Gus Von Rowan. I live at 4871 Northwest Radial Highway, Omaha 68104. I am here to speak today against the Ordinance 41369, changing open space into low-density residential development. In a prairie state like Nebraska, I would like to speak on behalf of open green space land as a way to actively clean dirty urban air, as a way to reduce noise pollution, and an important component of city stormwater infrastructure. The community is expressing their right to maintain these same inherent environmental values. If this development were not to be successful for whatever reason after its construction, there will be no going back to this crossroads. Other cities in the Midwest have embraced the value of keeping beltways of nature throughout urban environments to keep air and water cleaner. A Google Earth shot of Omaha in 2018 tells a story of development filling in everywhere. There are other places to build and grow. Continuing to gobble up our last expanses of open green space is a silly precedent to set. And I'm really going to talk a little bit about Skyline and the hat I wear as a landscape maintenance organization. I run the nonprofit Omaha Permaculture, and we're being approached to help maintain the Skyline Golf Course and with Douglas County Environmental Services, and to speak on behalf of how much it really costs to maintain a property of this size. Well, the biggest and first point, first off, is that we're not going to maintain it like a golf course. So there will be no fertilizers, herbicides, 3 different types of graded mowers. There will really only be a few passes per month and per week that actually maintain curb appeals, but at the same time allow habitat to flourish. But most importantly, as the environmental issues, as I mentioned earlier, is to maintain clean air and clean water for people in our neighborhoods. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next opponent.
Hi, Emily Bailey, 2226 South 91st Street. So this is, can we go to this screen? Sorry. Map of 91st and DuPont Street. So my house is where the blue dot is. Been living there for 8 years. We bought our house as newlyweds. We now have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old that attend the elementary school, the preschool, and I also serve on the pool board. And we are people that did try to join the golf course for several years, and were not able to. We were turned away. They did offer my husband like a temporary yearly seasonal pass, but they would not let us become full-on members. So the reason I show you DuPont Street here, the other square is our neighbors across the street, Beth and Pat Hamilton, who have lived there for 24 years. If we flip to the next screen, I've talked to Nate several times since the first inception of meetings. Obviously, selfishly, I'm very concerned for DuPont Street. It's currently a dead end. Our kids play in the street, but it's a natural right-of-way into the new development. Everything that Nate has told us has been that there will be no development there, that he's come up with 2 other ways. Yet we were shown a communication that is between the city and Nate Dodge, or the developer, NP Dodge, that there are plans for improvements within DuPont Street, which would need to be removed to accommodate a turnaround. I have no idea what this means. Unlike some of my other fellow people who have gotten up here to talk, I don't know very much about all the language and the formalities, so I'm just kind of a everyday Omaha citizen. But this, to me, I've got no idea what this means. It says that I've done something to my property that's going to have to be removed to make way for their turnaround. So I guess there's just a lot of confusion for myself and my neighbors across the street on what actually the future is of DuPont Street, because that does directly impact us, our lives, our kids, day in and day out. My last slide is on drainage. So behind our house, is the golf course. There's a very little kind of a natural stream that flows whenever there's rain, heavy rain, and it's just a constant flood of water. So if you see, this is the map from Lamp Rierson, and it's really, really small, but on the very top, there's words that say new path of drainage with arrows pointing outward. And those arrows pointing outwards are to all of our existing homes on the golf course. So we're clearly going to be affected by this drainage. This land is going to be brought up 10 feet in the air. So they're going to be up high and we're going to be down low, and all of this water is just going to be flooding, for lack of a better term, maybe into our backyards or into our homes. So definitely concerned about that.
Thank you. Next opponent.
My name is Hank Clouchy. I live at 9812 Walnut Street with my wife Gail, and we've lived in the 68124 zip code for 37 years. We were neighbors with Nate at one time, but we moved over to the Sunset Valley area about 10 years ago. Both of our children went to Loveland and both graduated from Westside High. And I come here today to oppose this development of Sunset Valley Golf Club property. My reasons are in line with previous speakers when it comes to traffic, child safety, property values, and need for green space. But my biggest concern is flooding. I'm living the dream along the Papio Creek. Every time it rains 2 or 3 inches, I run out to see how high the water gets. And I've seen it from the golf course across the way, the country club, all the way up to the 4th block of our retaining wall by the swimming pool. So I'm very concerned about anything built in this area that will make this worse. As I mentioned earlier, my property at 9812 Walnut, but I'm here, I see other people who live on the street too that have the same problems. My neighbor recently, 3 years ago, had water back up to his backyard, and this is existing right now. What's going to happen when they do this development? My house is upstream from the proposed development and is in the floodplain. That means I'm required to have flood insurance to secure a mortgage loan, and if I want to add on or replace my house if it is destroyed, I'm out of luck. During the last 10 years, my basement has flooded 3 times, and this was due to groundwater, not water coming on the top. I've had to install sump pumps in my basement that run constantly in the spring. Every time it rains 2 or 3 inches a day, the 2 sump pumps are working to prevent a 4th basement flood. I've already been flooded 3 times. You'd think I'd learn and move up the hill. I constantly check the Papio across the street, like I said, and a lot of us are in the same boat. With the recent building of the Sunset School, we've already noticed that there are more runoff coming across the bike trail that we ride every day. And when this green space is lost, it's going to be worse. This development will add buildings, parking lots, streets, and sidewalks, and like she said before me, raise the land up. And that is no good. I'm already witness to a lot more runoff from the bike trail since the school has been built. And I also have witnessed the Papio go over its bank several times in the last 10 years. So I'm really down on the ground floor of this thing. I'm really opposing this because of the water. The traffic's a bad deal, everything else, but the water is the biggest problem. This construction of Arbor Woods would act as a barrier to the flow of water and cause more water to back up onto our properties. City Council approval of this project would not only contribute to the threat of flooding in the area, but also send a signal that would promote future use and development along the floodplain. In this in this era of global climate change and record rainfalls, the City Council would be negligent in approving such a project, especially when the neighborhood has a viable green space alternative that people have discussed today. To quote Nate Dodge in the World Herald this morning, I love this neighborhood. This is a great place to live. I think we can create a place for people to be, a neat place for people to be. Would it be neat if this development was in his backyard and threatened his property with more traffic and more flooding? I think not. I contend that the real neat place would be a garden space that all the neighborhood could take advantage of, not unneeded apartment buildings and houses that will threaten our safety. In conclusion, I would like to quote John Winkler in 2014 when he said, who is the NRD, he runs the NRD, it's not if but when we will have a catastrophic flood along the Papio Creek system. In these times of climate change that has resulted in superstorms and unprecedented weather events, it would be irresponsible to develop this land along an already overtaxed floodplain system. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next opponent.
Hi, thank you. My name is Gail Clouchy. I'm with Hank Clouchy. Where is the transparency? Numerous questions have been asked, and they were never been answered or addressed by the golf course, NP Dodge, or the planning board. The golf course is a 501c3. Nonprofits are required to adhere to state and federal regulations. All legal regulations must be under consideration. The relationship between board members and their organization is a legal one. Board members have an obligation to monitor and oversee not only the organization's financial needs, but the ongoing regulatory programs. Nonprofit obligations. The board members' essential purpose is to ensure the organization's resources are used to achieve its purpose, running a golf course. Each trustee or board member has a responsibility to participate in decision-making on behalf of the organization. Members of the organization rely on the board of directors to provide sufficient information to the members so they can make independent decisions. If the members of the organization find that the information is invalid or incomplete, they have the right to question and receive answers. That never happened. Members of the golf course came to the golf course clubhouse to talk to the board of directors about what was going on. They were not allowed in the building. The independent advice is required and should be shared with the membership if the nonprofit is buying or selling significant assets or entering into a material contract. This is especially important if the organization is entering into a joint venture sale or merger, or any representative presenting the information stands to be of benefit to a contract. Gary Peterson has worked for NP Dodge for years. He has been on this board of directors for several years in several capacities. We feel that Discovery should show there's a joint venture on the part of NP Dodge, the golf course president, and the board of directors. The duty of care requires that board members attempt in good faith to assure that the membership has an information and reporting system that exists. It does not. This reporting system is adequate to ensure that the board and the organization, the appropriation information is in compliance with applicable laws. Clearly, for the appropriate information, this appropriate information is not in compliance with applicable laws. The golf course actions are not in accordance with the information published on the Office of Inspector General's page. This vote should be postponed at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next opponent.
Stephen Taylor, 9117 Dorcas Street. My house backs up to hole 9 on Sunset Valley. I have a prepared statement, and I'm here seeking clarification and compromise with NP Dodge with their future plans. I implore you to carefully consider the ramifications of your decision today and the weight that it'll carry for the Sunset neighborhood for years to come. I am here to appeal to your sense of self. Would you vote if this was in your backyard or neighborhood? Your decision will change the culture, community, and dynamics of an area long loved and cared for by its residents. All of these people have shown to support the neighborhood that they know and love, to oppose the eyesores that will be placed. Nebraska is a part of the Great Plains, and outside of city centers, 3-story buildings have never looked natural or appealing, jutting out of the ground where native grasses once grew. I will end by asking you to answer one simple question as you consider your decision. When is the last time you've heard someone say, "Those 20-year-old apartments look really nice"? The fact is, houses adapt to the time and aesthetics. Large buildings do not. District 66 does not need more apartments. It needs more green space for its residents, children, and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next opponent.
My name is John Arndorfer. I live at 9318 Walnut Street. Just by way of an aside, I know someone was talking about the park, Toll Park. This is some kind of representation, but I think there's some question as to the desirability of that park. And I use it quite a bit with my son, but quite honestly, it does not live up to the standards that the city of Omaha should aspire to. This is a padlock that's on the baseball field, and it has been there for as long as I've lived here. And I've lived in the neighborhood 11 years. The fact is, the baseball field is leased to a private organization, so it's not really public in any true sense or meaningful sense. Although my son's kind of a sneaky guy, he's able to find a way through, but don't tell anyone. I've got a couple of things, and I'll try to make them brief to respect your time. Almost overnight, dramatic and drastic changes are being proposed for the land at the southern end of our Sunset Hills neighborhood. And more will likely come as the developer reserves the future right to construct additional apartment buildings in the floodway. Omaha's housing and real estate industries are robust and doing quite well. Compared nationally, Omaha's unemployment rate is to be envied. Housing prices are both affordable and below the national average. It's fair to say that things are going pretty well. So why would the city be inclined to support this measure? Does this development alleviate a housing shortage? No. Does it provide affordable housing to address some urgent societal need or some neglected class? No. In fact, Arbor Woods as proposed, will contain high-end homes and what are described as luxury apartments. From what I can tell, the most compelling rationale is to save this land from becoming vacant and blighted. And to keep it from becoming blighted, we must put houses and apartments on it as quickly as possible. What this development does do is fill a price point in a part of town that has become recently desirable. It occupies essentially a greenfield site, devoid of any complicated remediation or mitigation. It is the low-hanging fruit of central Omaha, a diamond in the rough, as it were. I would imagine that, from a developer's perspective, the golf course's principal asset is also its greatest liability, its location, both a blessing and, at least if not exactly at this moment, at some future date, a curse. Straddling the Big Papio Creek, described at the NRD's website as, quote, the most flood-prone waterway in Nebraska. For the Big Papio, that's quite a distinction. And what does the developer offer in exchange? A substantial investment, of course, the usual increase in the city's tax base, but these arguments will be made the same anywhere economic activity takes place. But with this proposal comes significant risks and enormous potential liabilities. One likes to assume that we have pretty well figured out risk, that FEMA maps and products are both accurate and reliable. Hey, it's a 100-year floodplain. What's the big deal? I won't be here in 100 years anyway. There is, however, a bit more to the story. As has been convincingly shown by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, two noted behavioral economists, one a Nobel laureate, universally, humans have some amazing blind spots when it comes to adequately evaluating probability and risk, such as, for instance, assessing flood risks. Kahneman and Tversky demonstrated time and time again that people, you and me, consistently overestimate our abilities to effectively understand and calculate the risks that we, again, you and me, routinely dismiss or significantly underestimate remote or long-term probabilities. Does the financial crisis of 2008 come to mind? Fortunately, this reality has become, if belatedly, more widely acknowledged by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The agency charged with evaluating flood risks nationwide. Even FEMA's Technical Map and Advisory Council's 2015 report, it's called TMAC, Future Conditions Risk Assessment and Modeling, acknowledged its shortcomings. It says the estimates that they provide are a snapshot in time, showing only current flood risk. That's cited on page 1. I'll skip down. It says this is problematic because past averages and trends may not always be accurate indicators of the future. And then jumping down a little bit further on page 9, it says there has always been uncertainty associated with these estimates, whether that uncertainty has been acknowledged or not. And I think what FEMA's come to in this report is acknowledging that they have, in the past, produced products without recognizing their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses. Kahneman and Tversky's research findings have begun to slowly reshape FEMA's approach to assessing risk, as indicated in the TMAC report's number 5 recommendation. Quote, FEMA should seek to recognize the systemic biases and simplify decision rules that individuals use in making choices under uncertainty. They talk about, a little bit later on in the document, that there are 2 problems with their approach. Past averages and trends may not always be accurate indicators of the future. Number 2, our observations, that is FEMA's observations and data for the past, are incomplete and can be inaccurate. Jumping down to a portion of page 68, there has always been uncertainty associated with our estimates, whether we have acknowledged it or not. When that uncertainty is combined with additional uncertainty related to future land use, topographic changes, hydrology, and hydraulics, the confidence in our estimates diminishes. Perhaps most startling of all was the report's statement contained in Section 3 entitled Future Conditions and Changes in the Floodplain. This is from page 71. It says, to date, the accuracies, degree of precision, and uncertainties associated with respect to flood studies and mapping products have not been quantified or published. So FEMA doesn't definitively know, and they haven't told us. They haven't published their results. They tell us a best guess, but that's about it. This is a rather startling acknowledgement indeed. 2 paragraphs down, the report continues. While care is exercised to identify and reduce uncertainty and bias in the results, no strict standards, let me just repeat that, no strict standards exist with respect to the acceptable amounts of uncertainty in flood hazard identification. Let me move on to a New York Times article from last month, December 2nd, 2017. It's discussing flooding in Houston after last year's hurricane. It says the New York Times examination found that in the years leading up to Hurricane Harvey, with a surging local economy, sounds familiar, fueling demand for upscale housing, the developers of The Woodlands had used a wrinkle in the federal flood mapping system, along with many dump trucks worth of dirt, to list dozens of lots out of the area officially deemed prone to flooding. What they had done, in effect, was, this is their term, create gerrymandered maps of risk. No one has suggested in the article, and here, no one has suggested that the developers broke any laws and that the company owns the Woodlands says it followed all applicable regulations and standards. But the experiences of the family that they profile in the article shows that even when mapping rules are followed to the letter, the results can be disastrous. I'll jump ahead. The article continues. One of the people whose homes was affected by this flood, Mr. Larson, called the changes that lifted the ground only slightly above the floodplain a bad idea, because such areas generally remain prone to flooding. He said, once a floodplain, always a floodplain, and it still got risk. At this point, it's worth stopping to consider a few things. A lot of Arbor Woods is in the floodway, and there is a proposal to build up the soil with thousands of truckloads of dirt. I'm not sure if I heard correctly, someone mentioned 10,000. When it's all said and done, this development will still be a game of inches, just above the floodplain, without much room for error. And then let me ask, is this really the kind of development, one in which acknowledged experts, FEMA, that the agency charged with doing so cannot quantify its uncertainties? Just to be clear, if FEMA is unable to quantify its uncertainties, that also means that, by extension, it cannot quantify its certainties, its knowns, as it were. To use one of Donald Rumsfeld's favorite turns of phrase, the risks become a known unknown. While reading FEMA's report, I felt like it was in a time warp, going back to 2008 during the financial crisis, and someone wanted to sell me a bunch of mortgage-backed securities or some credit default swaps, with the risks poorly understood by both the buyer and seller alike. Perhaps it is, after all, like Mark Twain is purported to have said, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that ain't so. Is this really the kind of development that the city wants to support and sanction? And in so doing, it seems to be playing what could be a strong hand, supported and reinforced by the city's own master plan and municipal codes weekly, to simply grant waivers, exemptions, approvals, and authorizations with no compelling interest and where a high degree of risk is involved, as if development in Omaha isn't already happening here and there and everywhere, as if there is some great unmet societal need that has been suddenly recognized and is now being addressed by this project, as if the idea that this land will become blighted and, heaven forbid, overgrown with tall grass. Is this what should compel the city to act so precipitously before the dandelions sprout? Concerns about grass in a prairie state, no less. Who could have imagined that? And what is the rush? For more than 50 years, the golf course has been a great community asset. And now, almost overnight, with very little public awareness and discussion, it is threatened to be radically transformed. And it justifiably faces tremendous opposition by those who will be most affected. Opposition not because we're a bunch of cranks and NIMBYs. In fact, we're welcoming a new school in August that will double the number of students and quite likely double the number of cars racing past our homes. Opposition because it fails to fit in. It fails to adequately address neighborhood concerns, and its impacts will be significant. I had an opportunity to watch excerpts from last City Council meeting in December. Around the 20-minute mark in the video, A representative for a proposed development spoke about the difficulty he and his client had faced before finally perhaps, identifying a workable site plan. It's to be called Townhomes of Village Point. I think you talked about it last month. Despite their frequent and persistent efforts, unsuccessful ideas for the property had been bandied about over the 15 years. The lesson being, it takes time to get things right. As the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither should Arbor Woods. We would encourage the developer to get things right and to work toward developing a better plan for this site, more consistent with the existing neighborhood. Let me be clear, I don't blame the developer. They identify a business opportunity and do what developers do. They provide a service and they try to make money doing so. And no doubt, countless others would willingly take NP Dodge's place were the positions reversed. But the city needs to ask, is this development worth the cost in terms of justifiable public opposition and in terms of the risks it imposes on the rest of society? It's widely understood and accepted that property owners are granted wide latitude with regard to their property. But there are recognized limits as well. And the city must seriously consider the public welfare, public safety, and its own willingness to take on the substantial long-term liabilities and risks associated with this project. Are we so desperate to think that this constitutes a great development? It's a development for sure, but one in which the city has no compelling public interest in either aiding or abetting. We can do better. NP Dodge can do better. It's a company filled with bright, talented, creative, and energetic people. It's a company with a long history of civic engagement and support throughout our community. By saying no to this proposal, you're affirming to us, the citizens of Omaha, and to NP Dodge that you have the confidence in them, that you know they can do better, and that we don't have to simply settle for a bland, cookie-cutter development that conforms not to the norms and standards of Sunset Hills and its residents, but to a standardized revenue-generating formula. We can, and we should, aim higher. If, for some inexplicable reason, the city is, I would argue mistakenly, inclined to support this proposition, it should require a conservation easement against future expanded development on this site for the privilege of supporting this project now. A conservation easement might be some small token to demonstrate that there was at least some small public benefit that came from this. The wisdom of this project escapes me, and while it's clear that I might have my doubts, I hope that you do as well. From everything we've read and been told, and as the city promotes greater infill development, it seems quite reasonable to assume that flood risks in Omaha will continue to increase. Indeed, I've yet to hear anyone suggest that they will decrease. With the increased development, according to FEMA on page 82, will come citywide changes to drainage, a decrease in the soil water storage capability, increases in water discharges, and watershed hardening, whatever that is, page 82, and so forth. With regard to overall flood risk, we will, it appears, be moving along a trajectory from some degree of uncertainty now, feel free to pick a number, to an increasingly greater degree of uncertainty, you can pick another number, in the future. No doubt these risks will be increasingly difficult to assess as infill initiatives in the city continue apace. One wonders if we've adequately factored in these development trends as we strive for a more compact and dense urban environment. Kahneman and Tversky noted that the human's tendency towards overconfidence and failure to accurately assess risk is not merely an amateur's problem, but is also very much an expert's problem. As their research has demonstrated, whether it was the overconfidence of radiologists to accurately read x-rays or technicians and engineers to precisely and accurately model and elevate the natural environment, evaluate the natural environment, we as a species consistently fail to properly assess risk, often to our great regret. This is not to be meant as an argument to discount expert research and opinion. Far from it. But it is an argument for realizing that experts too have their own biases and blind spots, and that we have yet to arrive at a state of perfect knowledge and understanding, especially with something as dynamic and as variable as the natural environment. Perhaps more accurately, this is an argument to proceed with a measured pace, an ounce of caution, a healthy amount of self-restraint, and a dose or two of humility, so that we can act prudently now and for generations to come. The parallels between the Arbor Woods development and the one proposed not too long ago adjacent to the Fair Acres neighborhood are strikingly similar. The justifiable fear of increased traffic, threats to public safety, and neighborhood concerns led the City Council wisely to deny that project. Sunset Hills residents take heart knowing that, along with the heightened risk to public safety from building precariously close to the floodway, the exact same concerns apply to this project. Do we want to be known as Omaha, the city that builds in a floodway, or would we rather be Omaha, the city with a vision, and the conviction to carry out that vision? We appeal to you, the City Council, who have been elected to exercise your good judgment and to take a long, careful view with regard to the challenges and opportunities facing our city. To be both steward, to preserve that which deserves our admiration and our preservation, and visionary, to work toward a better quality of life for all our fellow citizens. We hope that you will exercise your good judgment and deny the zoning changes, the waivers, and the exemptions requested, and the development as proposed. Thank you very much for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you. Next opponent.
Constantine Busalis, 1110 South 92nd Circle. Thank you for hearing my position. My issue relates to traffic, which I know has already been addressed, but I would like to make an additional point that may prove useful. As you probably know, many of the streets in Sunset Hills area have been designated as substandard by the City of Omaha. As such, the city has stopped maintaining them as far as repairs. They are deteriorating rapidly, even though some of the neighbors try to patch them. I am concerned that increased traffic from this project in the area will soon make them unpassable. Increased traffic, particularly on these kinds of roads, can also be very dangerous for pedestrians and kids going to school. It's because these roads are generally very narrow, and they're generally accompanied by trenches on each side of the road, some very short but some very deep, which stops egress off the road if there's traffic. So because of this, I think that the traffic problem is a good point in reconsidering approval of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next opponent. You've gotten through all of them?
I'm just going to do a conclusion. We got some? Okay.
My name is Rich Durand, 9105 Arbor Street. I haven't heard anybody who lives on Arbor Street, so I thought I'd throw my 2 cents in, since that's going to be the main area that the construction trucks will be coming through. That is a cul-de-sac right now. It's about 75 yards long. The main thrust of the traffic in the neighborhood will probably try to come through that area. It is completely inadequate when you think about another 500 to 700 cars trying to maneuver through a street like that, and possibly what will end up happening, it'll end up going through the neighborhood, trying to navigate through the neighborhood. This is an ill-conceived plan. I think that there's been enough evidence to show that. If the only reason that the board would approve this is because there's an estimated $40 million valuation that will end up in the coffers of the city of Omaha, I would suggest to you that that this is not a valid reason when you bring in public safety and when there's public safety involved. You have noise pollution, you have construction pollution, you have trucks coming in and out day in, day out, month to month for who knows how long. This is a quiet neighborhood, and the disruption is going to be enormous. It really will be enormous. And the only benefit here goes to NP Dodge. There is no benefit to any of the residents who live in this area. Absolutely none. The only benefit is the profit that NP Dodge is going to make on this deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you start, how many do we have left as opponents? Are you the last one? Okay.
Zahi Zaidan, 1715 South 91st Avenue. I just want to talk about one thing. I think a lot of the points I had was discussed, but I would just want to highlight one item that I think hasn't been highlighted enough. There is no doubt there is some short-term benefits, with regard to taxes or employment that's going to happen. But when I was reading more about this topic, I work in the medical field, so I did a literature search. That's what people in the medical field do anytime they have a question. And I came across a really big, actually, dossier by the Administration for a Floodplain Management Task Force. It was published in 1993. Washington was a big study was done by the government because there was a big floodplain happened in the 90s. And what they found, actually, if you have a property that's already been built, there's a house in it, that's in a floodplain. If you purchase that property and you destroy it, you end up paying less on the long term rather than keep doing the same mistake again. So with regard to insurance costs that the person is paying, with regard to the federal insurance program that you have to pay back, the costs are prohibitive, actually. And they proved it because there was a flood that happened in the mid-90s after that, and the costs for those flood-prone areas were much lower even after they bought the property. So my point is that why to build it from the beginning, because the cost is going to be incurred upon all of us for a very short-term profit. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one quick question, if I can submit it really quickly.
Well, it won't be a question. You can ask.
Yes.
You can make a statement. You can't ask them a question.
So I would like clarification if...
Name and address for the record,
Steve
please.
Taylor, 9117 Dorcas Street. I would like clarification if NP Dodge has done any due diligence regarding the amount of school kids that will be attending Sunset School that District 66 just built, and what the capacity they're expecting to consume with that new school. Can the school cope with the newly built houses and apartment complexes and the families moving in? So, thank you.
Thank you. That's all the opponents? Do the proponents wish some rebuttal time? Please.
Yeah. Quick, I understand some people have to leave. Is that correct? How much time do we have?
About a half hour.
Okay. First of all, we may be able to... Rick Anderson, 2120 South 72nd Street, attorney representing the applicant owner. I'd like to call Nate Dodge with respect to the very last question, with respect to the school issue.
Nate Dodge, 8701 West Dodge Road. Have talked to the superintendent. They are, as you know, doubling the size of the school. I do know there are meetings that would expand the boundary of the current Sunset boundaries, and they are considering changing that based on the number of people that would be living in the development.
They would add on to what they're currently building?
No. Oh God, no. The school stays. The school would be planning on staying the same.
Let me have you guys talk privately after this is over, okay? Thank you.
Okay. Secondly, let me say, first of all, that this is the preliminary plat. We have conditions, many of which have been the matter of discussion here, conditions before we can come forth with the final plat for approval. Those conditions include the development permit on the flood fringe. That is the drainage issue that they're talking about, the flood drainage issue. That is in process. That is a very rigorous exercise with stakeholders at the City of Omaha engineers, stakeholders at the NRD, the engineers, as well as the developer who's a stakeholder. And those people are looking at the protection of the area. So that will go forth. The same thing is true of traffic. We have traffic studies that have been done, that have been out, but because traffic has been, we think, misstated here, we'd like Matt Cruz from Lampernier to come up and give you some perspective, albeit it's early, because we have the City of Omaha looking at this, but some perspective on the numbers that we're talking about in terms of traffic.
Matthew Cruz, Lamprey Nurse & Associates, 14710 West Dodge Road. I'm a professional engineer in 5 states, including the state of Nebraska. I've been doing traffic work in the City of Omaha for 17 years, so I'm familiar with the methodology and what needs to happen. We submitted a draft traffic study that has been mentioned in October of this year at the public meeting with the residents, where the concerns were shared with us. 93rd and Pacific and 90th and Shirley were mentioned, and the City of Omaha asked us to go back out and collect more data at those intersections, which we have done. We revised our traffic report, resubmitted that back in November, and that's the current study that the City of Omaha Public Works is reviewing right now. Once we receive comments back from the City of Omaha, we'll work with them and make any revisions necessary. Math has been thrown out here with developer math and other forms of math. If you go back to the slide that was shared, the residents estimate that Sunset currently generates 6,600 trips. That was from their slide where they came up with the 24 vehicles per acre. They referenced our total of 1,941 trips that our development is going to generate. That's where they had the 75 trips per acre. If you use math and divide 1,941 by 6,600, that's 29.4% of how much our trips represent from their trips. So when there's terminology of tripling and quadrupling of trips thrown out there, our trips represent 29.4% of the trips currently generated by Sunset Hills neighborhood. In the AM peak hour and PM peak hour, which is the current periods that we analyze for the City of Omaha, our development is going to generate roughly 146 trips in the AM peak hour and 195 trips in the PM peak hour. Based on our counts at 93rd and Pacific, as has been mentioned, we estimated 5%. That's been up to 10%, and that was based on roughly 600 vehicles are using 93rd and Pacific on the south side. If you divide the 600 by 6,600, it's roughly 9%. We had overestimated at 10%. So that's how we came to that. The 20%, I think, is that at the 93rd and Dorcas Street, we showed 20% leaving our development at that point. 10% of that turns right on Dorcas and heads towards 90th Street. So there was a little confusion. We estimate 10% ultimately to go to the 93rd and Pacific Street intersection. It was referenced that Arbor Street, we feel, is the natural access point for most of the trips from this development. The immediate location of this intersection that's signalized lends itself to both 90th Street and ultimately the south to west center road. You can go north, south, east, west with relative ease on those streets. So, like I said, our study is being reviewed by the City of Omaha Public Works, and we'll address any comments or revisions that they seem fit.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll reiterate that is a condition, express condition of the preliminary plat. It will have to be addressed with the city, and it will have to be addressed before we go to final plat. We might also indicate that we inquired from the city also and are told that they have looked at 93rd Street from a volume and speed standpoint as to whether calming devices ought to be put in there presently. They have indicated to us, the City Public Works, that it doesn't warrant any devices at this time, and absent meeting their warrants, none are going to be placed there. It is not dependent upon our development causing any of that problem. A matter of some errors in the documents, to the extent that errors have been pointed out to us, they have not been errors in terms of substance, but there have been words from here and there. Those have been corrected, especially in the traffic study, and I think that's the item where they were brought up. They occur, they're unfortunate when they do, but they've been corrected, but we don't know of any errors of substance at all. I might also say, with respect to, and I apologize for bouncing around, but different people were talking at different times and we tried to collect it, but The drainage study, that is the study that talks about the fill permit. Understand that various people have talked about the concern that they have right now. We've said that that is in the study method, and it will be presented to the City of Omaha at the proper time after the engineers from NRD and the City of Omaha and Lamper-Nearson have looked at it. But from the paper today, you can see that John Winkler from the NRD has stated that there are no red flags that appear to date. There's no reason to not proceed with the study, which is what the preliminary plat allows to occur. There was a comment about we're even asking for sidewalk waivers. Just to give you an example, the sidewalk waiver we're talking about is how far from the curb it is. Whether it's 4 feet, 3 feet, or contiguous with the curbing. The city has said we're not going to allow it contiguous, I believe. You've got to have a grassy area that's separated back. We've agreed to go along with that. We like the design differently, but that's the sidewalk waiver. We're not waiving sidewalks in any part of this. We're going to provide sidewalks, and we're going to provide a useful area for people to walk, going perhaps to the commercial area at 90th and Center. With respect to the definition of redevelopment, which was discussed at some length here, we understand that the City of Omaha, the legal department has provided an opinion with respect to that says that this is clearly a redevelopment area. We think that that's an issue outside of this scope of this hearing as a result of that. And so we think that it's quite proper to go ahead without further consideration of that unless that comes up later. But that comes up in the context of the fill permit and can be addressed there. We had people address that open space has its own worth, that it cleanses the air, it's good for the environment, probably good for the soul. I can't remember all of the things he expressed. Understand again, here, we retained 60% of the open space in the outlots A and B and in the outlot C and otherwise. Up and down this corridor, there's a great deal of open space. There are parks across the way. The golf courses, even though they're not publicly available, they do provide a lot of the soulful and the clean air and environment that people are talking about here. With respect to DuPont Circle, we want you to know that that's a city requirement. The city required that we deal with that. We are attempting to deal with that. We've talked to the neighbors. We hope to deal with that in a way that's consistent with the neighbor's desire. It's a stub street, and it comes to an end. They've asked us to deal with how it comes to an end. We're trying to deal with it on the one hand with the neighbors, on the other hand with what the city's requiring. We are confident that we can come to a reasonable solution on that. But some of these things are things that the city has required, that we're going to look at, that we continue to proceed through the process before we can come back. But we think that this design that has been promoted is a reasonable design. It furthers so many of the master plan elements that have been developed in recent years for housing, connectivity, transportation, infill. All of these concepts are included in this plan. We don't think that moving ahead with either the amendment to the master plan or the preliminary plat means that discussions have to halt, but we do think it's time to move ahead. To the extent anybody couldn't get documents from people, certainly they could have come down to the city. That's an old-fashioned way of doing it. We applaud the city in putting forth city council documents, public or planning department documents as much as possible, and to suggest to anybody that that's purposeful by either us or the city, I think is off target. We're here to answer any questions you might have. Do we have anything else that we may have missed. We think that all of these issues will continue to be addressed. We think we are solving them as we go and solving them satisfactorily for the city.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, thank you, and thank everyone for coming today and your insightful comments. I had some questions for the developer, if you could come back up. One of the people who testified who lives near the DuPont on the east side of the property had questions about whether there would be drainage to the east because of elevation.
Yes,
and I know that overall there will, if this preliminary plat's approved, there'll be a grand study on drainage and all that, but I wondered what the property owners there can expect from what you know so far.
Rick Anderson, 2120 South 72nd Street. That was brought up earlier before this public hearing by one of the opponents in the last public hearing before the planning board. We addressed it by stating that yes, we do have to look at where that drainage will go. It had been brought up by the neighbor and we were already addressing it at the time. We did provide information that there would have to be a swale, that perhaps there would be some adjustment in the storm drainage, but it is being addressed. It is
You don't have
solid.
topos yet, the topographical?
We don't have topos yet for that storm drainage. Excuse me. No, please.
Hi, Joe Zadina, Lamper-Nearson, 14710 West Dodge. Yeah, that particular topic was absolutely brought up, and then contrary to the preliminary plat, like you said, we will elaborate on a larger study, but we did share with Mr. Onken a solution. We did kind of drill down into that area. There's about 3.5 acres of neighborhood drainage that goes to DuPont, so we kind of need to work with the city. We'd like to insert a curb inlet to accept some of that drainage, but then what that means is we'd have to bring our storm sewer up to that point and route it through our ponds, which I think we can do, and then provide for the overflow for those larger events. Design our drainage swales. Our storm sewers are designed for 10-year storms. Our drainage swales are to cover anything in excess of that. So we are looking into that, but it's not final. So.
Well, if this advances today, before I'm to vote on a final plat, you better have those answers, right. Including the storm water management plan for your site.
Yep. Okay. Because you're correct in that there was a preliminary drainage study submitted that tries to meet the ordinance with the post-construction no net increase at a preliminary plat level.
Okay. In terms of the traffic study, as I understand, that's also not complete. That it's in the process of being reviewed. Is that what you said, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, it's been submitted to the city, and it was revised and submitted again. To take into
If I could have Mr. Fitzer come up, the city's engineer,
all right.
See him out there.
Todd Fitzer, Public Works.
Is this something that came in when our former traffic engineer, who was leading the department, transitioned out, and before we had our new person hired?
The date this came in was November 2017, so it would have been
right in that time frame.
He left the 3rd, so probably after he left.
Okay. Since we don't know what the department's final position is yet in reviewing that, and you just recently hired the new city traffic engineer, what can you tell the applicant as well as the people who are in opposition as to what your process will be in the department?
The process is to take the traffic study and review the known parameters. That we'll go back through the warrant analysis, the trip generation, basically check all of their work, and then look at what their findings are and decide whether we concur or whether we would ask for something further to be analyzed.
Can one of the things that you analyze be whether, in light of predicted volumes on the north-south route to the connection to the new development, would satisfy the criteria for traffic calming installation in that area?
We normally don't predict whether or not traffic calming devices will be met. We certainly can look at that. And the other thing we could do is to work with the developer and suggest that upon completion of this project that we actually do physical counts at that time, which is how we ascertain our data for those devices, and if they're warranted, have an agreement in place, that they be placed at that time.
And isn't it not unusual in other developments that, in fact, the developer would actually bear the cost of that?
We have done that in the past, yes.
Okay. Is that something you'd consider?
Yes.
Okay. So that's another thing I would like addressed before we come back on final, if we could. Thank you, Mr. Fitzer.
You're welcome.
In terms of the open space, this is something that's been debated. I don't know whether Thoreau triggered this whole nature. I got a very interesting email from a constituent this afternoon. I read it, and it made me think about all these things, and whether it was Walden's Pond or, you know, Frost lamenting, nothing gold can stay, what's happening to our open spaces and conservation and all that. But it is an interesting issue, and how it's been tackled in other parts of the country is there are nonprofits that buy up easements, which then preserve in perpetuity open spaces, so that the people who own the property, who may be giving up a development right, would then have at least some compensation for that. And I don't know whether our community is heading that way or not, but as these things move forward, it's something that can address it. But in the greater, more immediate sense here, one of the speakers mentioned he understands that there's something coming here. There's likely to be something. Is conservation easement, in terms of the 60% that you are saying will not be developed, will it be sustained for a period of time in perpetuity? Will it be because of the PUD, or will it be because of an easement of some sort? Can you address that, Mr. Anderson?
I can. The use of the planned unit development, redevelopment concept does provide, I believe, that there can be no use of the open space without coming back to going back through the planning process. And I'm looking for some confirmation because I'm going from memory. So that is very helpful in having this included in the planned unit overlay. You can see that there is quite a bit of open space, even tucked in the neighborhoods, which was put there by the real estate company developing this in an effort to keep open space that's adjacent to there and to provide the buffering and all. So this will remain open space until something more could happen, but it can't happen without coming back through the process. Conservation easement, you have pretty close to that with the flood fringe there, unless something changes. But there is quite a bit of open space around here. If I could say just before I forget, on this street, you talked about traffic calming devices. We already have been told by the planning department, I'm sorry, showing in the wrong place, by Public Works in their review, that there will be a speed bump, if you will, probably halfway through the development itself for the purposes of this development because of the length of the street. Now, I think you were talking about off-site, but on-site, we're already taking that into account. Excuse me, I interrupted your question.
Yeah, but be prepared to consider if something's warranted on, is it 93rd?
93rd Street. Yeah. I understand what you're saying.
What, if any, access will be provided to the public to the open space, and how would that be achieved?
Nick Dodge, 8701 West Dodge Road. Obviously, these are public streets. We see that people from the neighborhood, particularly if you look on the east side to the south, it'll be a lot easier to get to the Sunset Hills Elementary School through the development, so obviously be able to go through there. We're working with the NRD to make it so that the Big Papio Trail will have access, and therefore there will be public access to that. And then we have an agreement with the members of the golf club that all of the amenities that are in the development, the members of the golf club will have access to the amenities of the development.
So in terms of this big, light, greenish colored open space along the creek, which is the present golf course, will that be closed off to everyone but your residents, tenants, and former members of the golf club?
It'll certainly be developed chiefly for the people within the development, but there will be public ability to get to those spaces.
I would ask you to consider, given the recreational liability statutes in the state that encourage people to open up private property for those purposes, to consider that, because if you're already seeing people who want to access and are drawn to the space, it might be hard for you to keep them out.
It'll certainly be considered.
I mean, if the one boy can get into Toll Park with locks and chains, I think it's fair to say you're going to have people there, and it may be something you want to develop into your
There will
plan.
not be locks and chains on this.
On the homes, Mr. Anderson, as I understand it, the lot prices, we were told, on the properties to the east and on the single families are $75,000 apiece to start.
75 or 80,000, going up to 125,000, depending upon the size of the lot.
And then
That's
I
right.
thought I saw home construction price with that.
Home completion values
450 to
would
5.
be in that range, 425, I thought, to 550. That kind of range would be what would be consistent with the kind of lot prices
What
and
in
with
terms
the amenities
of
that are here.
what in terms of promises that the neighbors can hold you to will you commit to in terms of minimum standards for acquisition and construction and covenants for maintenance and upkeep? And
The covenants have not been put in place yet, but obviously we have, the real estate company has a investment, long-term investment in their mind here, and because the homeowners association will have various, will be involved in the upkeep of the improvements, we would think they would have
Do you
interest in
have
the
a-
covenants too. We don't have a pro forma on the covenants yet.
Right. Now, one of the
There would be
things.
not to
Nate
interrupt, but
Dodge.
there would be, Nate Dodge, 8701 West Dodge Road, there would be covenants and there would be architectural control in
All right,
place.
thank you. That's one of what I was getting for. One of the things we've seen, and I don't know that there's a more metropolitan district than District 3 that I represent on the east end of the city, but even in Midtown and Exarban Village and some other areas, there are some very successful apartment developments that are fabulously maintained. They draw people in and who want to live there, even retirees. But the concern, rightfully so in many cases, is that people see apartments in different parts of the city that aren't kept up. So what representations and commitments can you make here that there's ongoing upkeep and maintenance like we have seen adopted by requirement in other parts of the city?
It would be in our best interest to keep this well-maintained and attractive to people on an ongoing basis. Will become part of the ownership structure of these properties. We have 3 generations of ownership structure in other apartments in the area, and it's my hope always that when you see a property managed by the NP Dodge company, that you look at it and it's different from its neighborhood in a positive way.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And for those of my constituents who reached out to me, I don't know if any of you were here, but I did read everything that everyone sent, whether you were a constituent or not. Because of the timing, I haven't been able to respond to everybody. There's a stack of stuff that we've received, and I just wanted you to know I received it. And my thought today is that at this stage, what I think that the requirements are for the development to move forward, mindful that there's a lot of things they have to do to get across the finish line. At this stage of the game, they've satisfied what I think the rules are of the road in terms of preliminary plat and amendment to the land use element. So I intend on voting yes today, but I think you can hear applicants that I have a number of questions that I would hope that you would address, and that you continue to meet with and be open to the neighbors, because you'll be neighbors for a long, long time to come. So thank you.
Thank you. There are no more lights. Is there a motion?
Maybe a light. Sorry.
Mr. Hardy.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to thank Sheila and Rick and John, and I've met with many others. I think, as Mr. Jerem indicated as well, we've all gotten a number of emails. I think I've responded, if not to every one of them, most every one of them, and had multiple conversations with some as well. And the passion and love and the demonstration you have for your neighborhood is commendable. I would also echo a little bit of what Mr. Jerem said about this. This is the preliminary plat stage. There are a number of hurdles that yet need to be accomplished in order for a final plat to even come before this council. I mean, it's something that I'm sure will be months down the line. And if this does pass today, I look forward to continue working with the neighbors in the neighborhood as well as the developer to make sure that if this does go forward, that it's done correctly. I wanted to see if I can, if you'll bear with me, because I go through some of my notes and talk about some of the issues that were raised. I know that it was. I'll start with traffic, I guess, and I've had some discussions with Public Works as well about traffic calming devices. I think there's certainly a willingness to, even though they might be off-site on 93rd Street, that's something that I think definitely needs to be thought about. I've spent a couple mornings and evenings parked on 93rd Street just watching the traffic go by, and I do know, and Sheila's indicated to me before that, you know, there are some people that tend to go over the speed limit, but and unfortunately that's just not 93rd Street in Omaha. We have other issues in probably every street, but again, I think that's an area that we need to take a look at. As it relates to parks and open space, I will say that you know, I think our city has a great park system. I think we have over 240 parks, if I'm correct, Mr. Bench. I know we have a number of parks in the area as well too. With you know, you can go up and down the trail within a mile. You have Conoco Park, you have Cancer Survivor Park, you have One Pacific Place. There's, you know, there are a number of parks in the area, but it, you know, in looking at the plan too, I see that it looks to be that there's a lot of open space that could be left over, and maybe there's some easements that could be allowed for use for public use on that. So again, those are some of the issues. Let's see again. Oh, the flooding. And I think I've said this to Sheila and John and Rick when we met. I know I've said it to Nate and the development team as well. I think, you know, if the NRD and the planning department determine that this is going to cause an adverse effect upstream or downstream or at the point of development, that's not something I'll support. And I think the developer would probably tell us as well that if it's going to cause negative effects, that he needs to work with the NRD and planning to figure out if there is a way to do it without causing that concern. Excuse me. Parks, open space. I think there some of the issues that haven't maybe been addressed since we started this, but were raised by Sheila and some others, were regarding the PUD or the PUR. Again, that's not something that we're acting on today, but as we go through this process, we need to make sure that that those questions are answered, that the clarifications are made. Again, this is at the preliminary plat stage, and we do have the ability to maintain, I'm not going to say pressure, but we want to maintain the ability to get answers as we go forward in this process and make sure that the requirements that need to be satisfied to even get to a point to consider a final plat are accomplished. I think that's all I have tonight, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Festus.
Thanks, Mr. President. I don't want to be repetitive of testimony or questions from my colleagues, which I think did address the main issues involved with this case, but as I see them, they are the traffic study that's been submitted but needs to have final comments on by the city, and further development of what could be traffic calming ideas and things that will accommodate some of the legitimate concerns that we've heard about here today from a neighborhood. And a more definitive conclusion on floodplain, too, that we'll anticipate from the NRD is important, obviously. And I totally understand the impetus and the interest in additional green space, but I would also observe that this is a lot less dense than it could be, and I think the developer has that green space in mind and is trying to do his best to preserve that green space, absent it remaining a golf course, which does not seem to be in the cards. Two other things for now. I was quite concerned by those who were observing they had problem accessing the documents or the website wasn't working, so I do want to ask the city clerk to double check that and make sure that's not happening on this case or any other case, because that is a very important part of what we do going forward. And to the extent you are, I think Mr. Anderson observed, we always will have them at the city council office. A city council person can get them to you, so will the city clerk, so let us know if that ever happens in your practice again. Lastly, I guess, Ms. Rockwell, I want the neighbors to have a sense of, should this advance today on preliminary plat, what is the time frame until a final plat in which many more of these issues can be drilled into and finalized?
Sherry Rockwell, City Planning. Approval of a preliminary plat will authorize the developer to proceed with the detailed work. This could take a few months, it could take many months. All of the conditions listed on the preliminary plat approval will have to be addressed before an application is made to the planning board for a final plat approval.
So several more months before the details come back or before a final plat would be submitted yet to planning board or yet to city council. So there is time to work on these issues.
Yes, the issues will have to be adequately addressed before an application for final plat will even be accepted by the planning department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harding.
I'm sorry, I forgot just one or two more minor points, and maybe it goes to a little bit of what Mr. Festerson was saying too about. I know there were some comments about maybe is there's a rush to judgment. I would like to at least point out, and I think Ms. Rockwell kind of pointed that out as well too, that there is a natural process and progression to these types of issues, and you know, it's been through planning board months ago. It's for a couple different issues. It's come to us now at this point for our consideration on a preliminary plat. There will still obviously be public comment opportunities for the final plat, as well as a requirement for the developer to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for some certain waivers. So I did want to say that. I also wanted to just say that, you know, the city is not working on behalf of the developer. The city is not working on behalf of the neighbors. What the city's, I think, responsibility is to do, as much as we do for annexation packages, we need to look at whether or not the components of the plan make sense. We need to make sure that we have, you know, well thought out, controlled, managed growth. And I think those are the goals that we all want to see accomplished, whether we're the developer or we're the neighbors that are affected by this. So those were the other comments I wanted to make sure I weighed in on.
Thank you. And Mr. Harding, let me, if I might add to that just a little bit as well. The methods and methodology that you talked about are all methodology once it gets to the point where it starts to go to planning board and other places. When the project is first conceived and the things that they go through in order to get to the point where you're talking about sometimes takes a year, if not longer. So it's not a short process by any stretch of the imagination, and it's certainly not a short process once it gets to the point where you're talking about, but there are issues that happen long before that takes a year, sometimes two, in one case that I'm aware of, at least 3 years to get to the point where they were at where we are at this point today. So I just wanted to reiterate to you all as well that this is not a short process. This takes a long time, no matter what the project is. Once it's conceived, there are several meetings with the planning department and others before it even gets to the point where we are today. So it's not a slow process by any stretch of the imagination. And we're not on anybody's side here. We're just trying to get to the bottom of what the issues are so that we can make some, what we hope will be intelligent conclusions when we get to that point. And keep in mind, this is a preliminary plat, so we're still far away from that point at this point. So is there a motion? There are no more lights. Second.
Yeah.
Roll call.
Mr. President, I was going to say, too.
Okay, go ahead.
I was willing to make that motion, too, but so I'll be supportive of that as well. But I did also want to comment that I've appreciated everybody's testimony here today. You know, strong opinions on both sides, and some items very emotional, which we understand. But even during the conversation today, I see the developer talking with the neighbors, and that dialogue continues. And I think the developer is doing all he can to continue that dialogue and has engaged the neighborhood over quite a long period of time. I can tell you we don't always see that here, and sometimes it gets quite acrimonious, so I wanted to compliment everybody on their comments and their tenor, and also their ability to keep working together, because after all, you all are currently neighbors, and we appreciate the work that you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the preliminary plat. There are no more lights. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 65 and 66 are approved 7-0. Non-action items, items 67 through 97, do not require a public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and/or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on the agenda for consideration.
Motion adjourned. Second. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. It was for both. Motion passed, or meeting adjourned at 5:16.